Yi Futian and the others returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but the whole affair was far from over. The murderers who had ravaged the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were not apprehended and punished. Instead, they were brought back by the Dark World. This matter, of course, was not over. However, the battle that took place in the lower worlds had created quite a lot of waves. Cultivators in both Divine Prefecture and the Dark World noticed the news, and all the principalities were on high alert. Although Yi Futian did not fulfill his promises, at the very least, he was working hard on making them a reality. Had it not been for the Infernal King arriving in person from the Dark Court just in time, perhaps Yi Futian would have already killed those cultivators who brought terror to the lower worlds. It was said that they were the cultivators from the Infernal Clan, a peak principality of the Dark World. In that battle, a cultivator of the Tribulation level had his divine wheel of the Great Path crushed, which spoke volumes of the Heavenly Mandate Academy's resolve. As such, even though Yi Futian was not able to fulfill his promise for the time being, the cultivators from various forces in the Dark World would do well to remember the trouble they got themselves in and no longer dare to wreak havoc in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. In reality, how many of them dared to compare themselves with the Infernal Clan? Furthermore, if something happened to them, the Infernal King may not arrive in time to rescue them. After all, the Infernal King himself was a cultivator from the Infernal Clan. Likewise, the forces in the Divine Prefecture were aware of Yi Futian's determination. The Heavenly Mandate Academy, an ally, was actively fulfilling the promise made by Yi Futian to guard the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, not to control it. But for this, Yi Futian and the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy who had participated in that battle were greatly dissatisfied. They had witnessed the cruelty and bloodlust of their opponents. They had destroyed the realm and rendered it an inferno on earth. However, these killers left with their lives, which, of course, was much to their chagrin. In the Starry Sky world, there were many top cultivators at Ziwei the Great's cultivating court. In addition to the many powerful men from Heavenly Mandate Academy, some forces represented the Divine Prefecture. For example, the cultivators from the ancient royal family of Duan, the cultivators from the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow, and the father and daughter duo of Lord Luo and Luo Su from Outer Violet Heaven were all in attendance. Emperor Shi, thunder-punishing Skylord, the Millet Emperor Li Changxing, and the others had been comprehending the mystery of this starry sky all along to see if they could comprehend something from it. After all, the Great Emperor was an irresistible allure for any top-level cultivators. They hoped that in perceiving the meaning of the Great Emperor, they might have the opportunity to explore the mystery of a higher realm. At this time, Yi Futian and the others had returned as well. Although they were eager for revenge, Yi Futian understood the situation clearly. He knew the limit of his own strength. What could he use to attack the forces in the Dark World? The strength of Heavenly Mandate Academy was far from enough. Emperor Yi. At this moment, in the starry sky, several beautiful ladies turned to look at Yi Futian. They were the three goddesses from the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow, Qin Qing, Jiang Yueli, and Chu Hanshi. The Sword Goddess was not far in the sky above them. She was comprehending the will hidden within this starry sky world. The higher a person's realm, the more they could sense that unfathomable aura. Vaguely, they could perceive that this starry sky seemed to be transformed by the will of the gods in heaven. Although they were not able to detect anything solid, it did bring them some insights. For some lucky person, perhaps an epiphany could be experienced. Yi Futian nodded to the goddesses, then said to Jiang Yueli, Goddess Yueli has been in the 8th realm for many years and is the existence closest to the peak of Renhuang. I wonder if this starry sky world could help the goddess take that one last step. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult than that. Jiang Yueli smiled gently while looking at Yi Futian. She said, this last step is also the most difficult step to take. Once this step is taken, one then embarks on the path to higher pursuits. However, under this starry sky, a mysterious and unpredictable power is perceived. I hope I could comprehend something from it. She then smiled and continued as if she had remembered something, don't keep talking about me. When I saw Emperor Yi last, I never thought that your strength would grow so rapidly. Today, your combat effectiveness should be well above mine. Yi Futian's growth was indeed frightening. In her eyes, he was still a young genius talent who used to tag along with Li Changsheng and Zhong Chan. However, now, he was stranger than her even if he was behind in realm. Goddess Yueli is overly modest. I am only in the 7th realm, quite a bit below the goddess still, Yi Futian replied. Next to them, Qin Qing and Chu Hanshi were both astounded by Yi Futian's growth. They knew that their senior sister was right. Yi Futian's combat effectiveness was already far above them. Now, other than the major figureheads, it's hard for anyone to compete with him. Once upon a time, he was chased and threatened by Ning Hua, who did everything to suppress him. But today, if the two were to meet again in battle, Ning Hua probably wouldn't be able to defeat Yi Futian. Whatever power that the goddesses want to perceive, I can urge the divine power of the starry sky so that the goddesses may perceive it more clearly, said Yi Futian. The three of them were speechless when they heard what he said. It seemed that Yi Futian was in full control of this starry sky world. At this time, the sword goddess, who was above in the sky, came over to Yi Futian and said, "Is the will of Ziwei the Great still in this starry sky world?" Yi Futian bowed slightly toward the sword goddess, extremely courteous, and replied, "To answer Elder's question, the will of Ziwei the Great has been completely integrated with this starry sky world. As long as this starry sky world exists, then the will of the great emperor exists with it also, unless the starry sky world is vanquished somehow. However, what kind of tribulation would be able to vanquish this world? That would probably be something that requires the intervention from the great emperor. Here, he could leverage the starry sky in battle. Back then, even the original palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace was killed by him when he leveraged this power. Therefore, only the likes of the great emperor might stand a chance to destroy this starry sky. Anyone else would perish." The sword goddess nodded gently and understood everything. This was probably the reason why she had sensed a mysterious and unpredictable force in this starry sky. "May I perceive it a little more clearly?" the sword goddess asked. "Of course," replied Yi Futian. "Elder, please follow me." "Well, then." The sword goddess nodded as the two moved higher up. The face of Ziwei the Great was still there, and they appeared just under that massive visage. Yi Futian looked up at the starry sky, and the boundless sky suddenly brightened up a few degrees more. As the stars shone, the infinite divine glory of the stars showered upon the sword goddess, who was beside him. At this moment, the sword goddess raised her head to look at the starry sky. She stretched out her hand to touch the starlight, and that feeling became even stronger. Many cultivators now looked at them and marveled at Yi Futian's absolute control over this starry sky. A turn of his thought could attract the divine glory of the starry sky. Even the will of the great emperor could be summoned. After a long while, the sword goddess said to Yi Futian, "Thank you very much. Elder is being too formal." As Yi Futian moved his thoughts, the starry divine light gradually dissipated. He continued, "In this starry sky world, aside from these imperial stars, many stars contain some type of particular powers, suitable for many in the Renhuang realm to comprehend. However, this was not necessary for someone like yourself and your realm. However, if you agree, people from Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow may come here to cultivate and use this place as a place for cultivation." The sword goddess stared at Yi Futian, wondering if he meant for the cultivators of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow to cultivate here. Once he saw the sharpness in her eyes, Yi Futian continued, "The Heavenly Mandate Academy could be an ally with Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow. Now that chaos reign over the original realm, sooner or later, it will spread to the Divine Prefecture and the rest of the world." The sword goddess understood Yi Futian's meaning instantly. While her eyes were still fastened on Yi Futian, she then nodded and said, "Very well." Clearly, she was willing to accept him as an ally. In fact, she was very optimistic about Yi Futian's future prospect. Chapter 2285, The Future. Yi Futian's potential was clear enough to the Divine Prefecture. But the cultivators from the Dark World and Empty Divine Realm, too, could see his potential and the future that awaited him. He possessed various kinds of imperial-level inheritances, all of which were lusted after by many enchanting geniuses, but none could obtain and control them except Yi Futian. Such a stunning figure would be another legend in the making. There was even a chance for him to prove the realm in the supremacy of the way. But today's Yi Futian was still in a period of development, and because he was limited to his own strength, he needed allies. The kind of alliance formed at a time like this would naturally be the most stable. Now, the sword goddess cultivation had reached a bottleneck. After the peak of Renhuang, the crossing of the divine tribulation follows, which would be a real challenge unimaginably difficult to accomplish. Perhaps, Yi Futian may be able to help her in the future. It was an opportunity for Yi Futian as well as for herself. Thank you, Elder. Yi Futian bowed slightly to the sword goddess. The sword goddess had strong cultivation and was definitely a powerful ally. I'll talk to the other elders, Yi Futian said again, and the sword goddess nodded. Go, she said. Obviously, she understood that Yi Futian wanted to strengthen the power of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. The original realm used to be nothing. But since its unification under Yi Futian, with the power of Ziwei Segmentum behind him, the original realm was now a mighty force. As it continued to seek allies, the Heavenly Mandate Academy would become stronger still. Compared with other principalities in the Divine Prefecture, the Academy had already surpassed most of them. Even the Domain Chief's manor was no longer a competition unless it recruited some powerful cultivators who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path. Once such an existence had been produced by the Heavenly Mandate Academy, it would immediately become one of the most powerful principalities in the Divine Prefecture. Furthermore, this was not taking into consideration that teacher from Four Corner Village. If that teacher was included, then the Heavenly Mandate Academy could be regarded as a pinnacle principality. However, the teacher seemed to live outside of this world and had no interest in participating in secular affairs. Even though he made an appearance in that battle in the original realm, it was only for protecting Yi Futian, and he did not demonstrate his full strength. Yi Futian found the Duan family as well. Duan Tianxiong from the ancient royal family of Duan agreed readily enough. He was on Yi Futian's side in that battle and would never refuse such a request. In addition, he was already quite optimistic about Yi Futian when they were still in the Divine Prefecture. Later, he had witnessed the strength and the cultivation of the teacher from Four Corner Village, coupled with more and more revelations of Yi Futian's enchanting talents. He would obviously never miss an opportunity to form such a powerful alliance with the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Finally, Yi Futian came to Emperor Shi and bowed, saying, Emperor Shi, I heard what you said just now. Do you want me to become an ally of the Academy as well? Emperor Shi smiled and asked Yi Futian. I dare not. Yi Futian shook his head and said, My life was saved by the Elder, or I may very well have already perished in the battle at Donghua Domain. Many of our friends also owed the Elder for sheltering them in their time of needs, so I am in no position to demand anything from you. I only wanted to let you know that the Elder and cultivators from Turtle Deity Island are more than welcome to cultivate at Ziwei Imperial Palace anytime you wish. You can also go to Four Corner Village if you wish. There are some cultivation grounds in the village that may be suitable for Renhuang from Turtle Deity Island. Emperor Shi smiled and nodded. If I have the opportunity, I would also like to visit the teacher in the village, but I don't know if he would see it as a disturbance to his cultivation. If Emperor Shi were to visit in person, the teacher should be willing to receive you, Yi Futian replied. As for Emperor Shi and the Millet Emperor, Yi Futian would not mention anything about the alliance. He had previously cultivated at Wangshan Watchtower, and he owed Emperor Shi his life. So, he wouldn't talk to them about the alliance because their relationships were different. Moreover, even if he didn't mention it, in time of real crisis, Emperor Shi, the Millet Emperor, and the others would not stand idly by. All of them were there in the last battle. Futian. Emperor Shi looked at Yi Futian and suddenly asked, You now have comprehended the will of many great emperors, and your understanding is deeper than most, so the speed of your cultivation is much faster than of ordinary people. How many years will it take you to reach the peak of Renhuang? Within 20 years, said Yi Futian. 20 years, Emperor Shi nodded. If he could really do it in 20 years, it would be considered extremely fast. With Yi Futian's combat effectiveness, once he stepped into the peak of Renhuang, he would unlikely to find any opponents beneath cultivators of the tribulation level. How about divine tribulations? Emperor Shi asked again. Yi Futian shook his head. I haven't even touched the peak of Renhuang. I have no idea how long it will be for me to cross the divine tribulations. Which level do you think you can reach? Emperor Shi looked at him and asked. When he was crossing the divine tribulation of the Great Path on Turtle Deity Island, it was fraught with danger. He felt that was already his limit, and his cultivation had reached its limit. He was quite satisfied with his own progress. Even if he stayed at this level, he would still be one of the top cultivators in the world. However, any cultivator would want to go to higher ground and see further, and he was just a few steps away from the highest point. But these couple of steps were insurmountable for the majority of the people. Yi Futian revealed a look of contemplation as if recalling his youth. He thought of his adoptive father. After having experienced so much, the memories of the past were like a century ago and had become a little obscured with time. But some things had already been seared inside of him. He was destined for greatness, and he believed in his adoptive father and himself. He knew that in time, he would reach that point. Imperial, Yi Futian looked at Emperor Shi. Emperor Shi looked at Yi Futian's eyes and saw there was great confidence in the depth of those eyes. With this one word, how many in the world dared to say that they were capable of setting foot in that realm? Even those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path dared not to lay so bold a claim. But Yi Futian had bluntly stated that he could get there. Emperor Shi was touched in his heart. This youngster had such unshakable confidence in himself. I can't wait to see it, Emperor Shi said with a smile and some expectations. At this moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly came upon them, causing Emperor Shi and Yi Futian to end their conversation. They looked far into the distance and saw that a figure was bathing in an incomparable starry glow under the stars. Above the starry sky, an imperial star was emitting magnificent divine glory. As the imperial star's divine glory descended on that cultivator, terrible changes took place in him as his aura continued to become stronger. Uncle Tai. Yi Futian had a surprised look on his face, as that cultivator who bathed in divine glory was Blind Tai. An indescribable golden glory burst from Blind Tai, and the shape of the divine hammer could be faintly made out, filled with shocking power. He was covered with golden armor, shining lights streaming all around him. An even more perfect aura now spread out from him. The cultivators in Four Corner Village were looking there as well, feeling quite emotional. Blind Tai was about to make a breakthrough. Chapter 2286, Blind Tai's Breakthrough. In the starry sky, many cultivators looked yonder, and their hearts were disturbed. Blind Tai was the first person Yi Futian helped after he communicated with the Imperial Star, and he gave that Imperial Star to Blind Tai. Later, Blind Tai inherited the will of the Imperial Star. Even after everything was over, he often bathed in the Imperial Star to cultivate. Since then, he had not stopped cultivating. Now, he was about to break through the realm. He was already an upper Renhuang in the 8th realm. This breakthrough meant that he would step onto the peak of Renhuang, with a perfect great path. It was a leap that would allow him to become a major figure among the giants, shoulder to shoulder with cultivators from many top principalities in the Divine Prefecture. Back then, the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan, who betrayed and blinded him, was also at the peak of Renhuang. After this step, his cultivation would be equivalent to that of the great elder, and Moku would no longer be a contender. The breakthrough of Blind Tai also excited so many others. He was also the first person to break through the shackles of the realm in the starry sky world. The event itself held extraordinary significance. This, inevitably, encouraged the other cultivators to increase their own expectations. No one was happier to see this than Old Ma. When he was in the village, Blind Tai had the best relationship with him, and they were very close friends. Even Tai Chu and Xiao Ling were childhood sweethearts. No one understood better than him the pain that Blind Tai had endured over the years. Witnessing this day, Old Ma was happy for him, and a bright smile hovered around the corner of his eyes. Next to Old Ma were Fang Gari, Jiu Huai, and some others. This guy was lucky beyond belief, Fang Gari said with a smile. It's not just luck. Old Ma said, he was betrayed once upon a time, and when he returned to the village, he almost lost his cultivation. After the teacher cured him, he began to recover his state of mind. For many years, he forged as a blacksmith, cultivating his mind and soul. After so many years, hatred is no longer his only focus. He came out of the village to protect Futian, and because of that, he received this opportunity and the achievement of this day. Perhaps this is all fate. Indeed. Fangari smiled and nodded. The luck was true enough, but everything was destined to be this way. Whether it was a coincidence or fate, Blind Tai would become another top cultivator in the village after Old Ma. After Blind Tai's breakthrough, apart from the teacher, Four Corner Village would have two giant figures. Not only did they need to keep up, but those youngsters need to grow up quickly. We have to work hard too, Fangari smiled and said to those who were around him. Blind Tai had now surpassed him. The person next to him smiled and nodded, looking towards Blind Tai. The divine glory of the imperial star rushed madly into his body as Blind Tai was suspended in midair. The armor on his body seemed to be getting brighter and more radiant. He now resembled a god of war. The aura from his body was constantly increasing in strength. The roar of the great path came from him. It was as if he was resonating with the starry sky. The divine light enveloped the boundless space, seemed to have turned it into a divine body of the great path, blooming with divine glory. This state lasted for quite a while and was accompanied by the endless radiance that lit up the starry sky. As the divine light on the imperial star was not there, even as Blind Tai was still suspended in the air, his body seemed to have calmed down. The divine light on his body retracted, though his entire body was still as bright as a divine body. He did it. Those cultivators in the starry sky shuddered. After a while, Blind Tai moved his body as his head raised slightly. Although he could not see, his perception had become much sharper. Congratulations. Many cultivators put their hands together and greeted Blind Tai, congratulating him on the breakthrough. He was the first person after Yi Futian to break through the realm in the starry sky world. People from Four Corner Village arrived, and Old Ma smiled, saying, "Not bad. Blind Tai, now you are much better than us old guys," Fangari said with a smile. They were all from Four Corner Village, and they were happy for him. However, after the breakthrough, Blind Tai did not feel too much excitement and appeared rather calm. "Uncle Tai, congratulations." Yi Futian smiled and greeted him as well. Blind Tai turned around, facing where Yi Futian's voice was coming from. "Futian, thank you," he said. His words sounded a bit heavy, but they were from the heart. Yi Futian was sheltered by Four Corner Village, but he had done a lot for the village in return. Today, he was able to make a breakthrough because of Yi Futian. "Uncle Tai, don't say that. We are like family, there is no need for thank yous," Yi Futian said with a smile, and Blind Tai nodded emphatically. That's right, the people in Four Corner Village were a family of their own. Although Yi Futian entered the village later, Four Corner Village had already accepted him fully and regarded him as a member of the village. "After your breakthrough, Mo Ku is probably trembling right now," said Fang Ji. The debt of yesteryears would be accounted for by Blind Tai sooner or later. Now that he had witnessed the peak of Ren Huang, he would no doubt seek revenge at some point. How could Blind Tai possibly forget what Mo Ku and the Demon Cloud Clan did back then? A terrible coercive spirit came out of Blind Tai. Mo Ku was someone he must personally execute. The Demon Cloud Clan must be held accountable for what they did to Uncle Tai. However, Uncle Tai has just broken through, and the priority has to be stabilizing the realm. But the power on this imperial star can still be used. Yi Futian said with a smile. Blind Tai nodded. He hadn't lost himself because of the breakthrough. Although in this realm, killing Mo Ku was not a problem at all for him, the strength of the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan was formidable. To kill him, his strength needed to be fortified some more. "Uncle Fang, the Demon Cloud Clan should still be in the land of the original realm, right?" Yi Futian asked Fangari, who was next to him. "It's possible," Fangari nodded. Now that the original realm has gone through such a change, with all the principalities of the Divine Prefecture still there, the Demon Cloud Clan probably won't want to leave and may cultivate in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Yi Futian nodded. The power of Heavenly Mandate Academy alone could destroy the Demon Cloud Clan outright, but this was Uncle Tai's goal for a long time. He ought to have a chance to accomplish it himself, with them on the side to assist. Uncle Fang, please go back to the academy and have them find out the whereabouts of the Demon Cloud clan, see if they can find out where they are currently, said Yi Futian. No problem, Fang Gari nodded. Now Yi Futian was acting even more like a leader in his demeanor. Fang Gari was delighted to see Yi Futian behave like this. This was the only way he could truly become the leader of a dominant force. The Heavenly Mandate Academy and Four Corner Village were all waiting for him to mature into his role. As formidable as he was, the teacher of the Four Corner Village did not care much for mundane affairs. Fang Gari could see that the village would eventually belong to Yi Futian in the future, and not him or Old Ma. Obviously, Old Ma had nothing to say about Yi Futian other than helping him, as he had done this since the beginning. Blind Tai's breakthrough would only be better for Yi Futian in the future. Coupled with the teacher's protection, some things did not have to be said out loud. Chapter 2287, Revenge. The Central Emperor realm of the 9 Supreme Imperial Realms was still the realm with the most cultivators. Although the Central Emperor realm was now under the rule of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, there were still many principalities from the Divine Prefecture that stayed in the Central Emperor realm to cultivate. The Demon Cloud was also above the Central Emperor realm. In an ancient city inside the Central Emperor realm, the Great Elder of the Demon Cloud was cultivating. In recent days, they had been keeping a low profile. Not only them, but the principalities of the entire Divine Prefecture were now much quieter than before. No one was out looking for trouble. The memory of that battle was fresh in their minds. Not long ago, Yi Futian and the many cultivators under his command had almost wiped out several Renhuang cultivators from one of the top forces in the Dark World. Obviously, the principalities from Divine Prefecture were hesitant to cause any more trouble. Strictly speaking, the Demon Cloud had had some previous entanglements with Yi Futian. When he was comprehending the corpse of Shunjia the Great Emperor in Shangqing Domain, Mo Ku was incredibly rude to Yi Futian. Later they had gone to Four Corner Village as well. Therefore, the Demon Cloud would not be causing any waves in the original realm. After all, the original realm was now Yi Futian's territory. However, at this time, the Great Elder, who was cultivating, suddenly frowned, and there was a slight sense of unease. It was as if he was agitated. Demonic clouds tumbled and tossed all around him as his brows knitted tightly together. Suddenly, his eyes opened, and those dark eyes stared into the distance. His expression changed. "Go," the Great Elder of the Demon Cloud said. He disappeared from where he was only to reappear in front of Mo Ku. With a wave of his hand, a group of his people was taken directly into the void. In an instant, his body rushed straight into the sky, descended high above the firmament. But at the same time, the sky suddenly seemed sealed shut as wisps of terrifying starry divine light descending in glory, turning into a starry light screen, shuttering that corner of the space. A figure appeared high above, and it was Renhuang Chen who had directly locked down this area. The Great Elder of the Demon Cloud stopped and hovered in midair, with Mo Ku close behind him. Both of them were powerful cultivators from the Demon Cloud, and neither of them looked pleased. Renhuang Chen, the tribulation-level cultivator from Ziwei Segmentum, had blocked them in. Looking further ahead, a group of cultivators came in mighty formation. The man in the lead, clad in white and with a head of white hair, was Yi Futian. Next to him was a plainly dressed middle-aged man. Though he could not see, there was an astonishing aura permeating from the man's body. Both the Great Elder of the Demon Cloud and Mo Ku could feel a faint sense of oppression. The man was none other than Blind Tai. Blind Tai couldn't see, but when he stood there, Mo Ku felt as if someone's stare had bored into his being. The feeling was so clear that he instinctively knew who it was. Even though the man didn't use his eyes, Mo Ku felt like the sensation was sharper than any stare. "You have broken through the realm." Mo Ku could feel the power from Blind Tai, and the expression on his face was priceless. A long time ago, he had severely injured Blind Tai and wounded his eyes. Not only did Blind Tai recover from such a mortal blow, but now, he had broken the shackles of the realm and set foot on the 9th realm to witness the perfect consummation of the Renhuang realm. This was the realm that he dreamed of, but now, Blind Tai had stepped into this realm before him. He was coming for him. He knew very well why the other man was here, to seek revenge for the past. The great elder of the demon cloud sensed it as well. He stared at Blind Tai and wondered just what kind of chance did he stumble upon to break the shackles of the realm so quickly and set foot on the peak of Renhuang. Was all of this possible because of the starry cultivation court? Blind Tai continued forward as the divine light of the great path burst out from him, and there was unbridled anger in this divine light. He faced Mo Kuwas and said, "The time of reckoning has come for what happened before." The moment his voice fell, a terrifying brilliance of the great path shot out from Blind Tai towards every crevice within the starry light screen. Like a god of war, his body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden armor. In the starry sky world, Blind Tai had obtained power from the inheritance of a great emperor. Although it was not from Ziwei the Great himself, this emperor was an imperial-level existence under the command of Ziwei the Great. An infinite and domineering god of war gradually condensed and emerged, appearing high above the sky. Like a true deity, a shocking power erupted from his body, enough to suppress and awe the world and everything inside it. The divine hammer in his hand showed a brilliant and incomparable glory that radiated outward, turning into rounds of light screens that wandered between heaven and earth. Blind Tai took a step forward and stood on high ground. His figure seemed to overlap with the figure of that heavenly deity. At this moment, Mo Ku, who had cultivated with Blind Tai once upon a time, felt an irresistible heavenly might. He stared at the man in the void and realized that this was no longer the brother of yesteryear but a powerful existence at the peak of Renhuang. The great elder of Demon Cloud moved forward, blocking the place where the divine light had landed. The mighty demonic power on his body was roaring and howling with great menace. An overwhelming demonic shadow seemed to sweep into the sky, contending with that deity in the void, refusing to back down. But at this moment, wisps of spatial divine light descended, covering the area where he was at. Another figure appeared in front of the great elder of the demon cloud. It was Old Ma. Once, you blinded his eyes and robbed the divine methods of Four Corner Village. Now it's time to settle these transgressions. Let them resolve their differences between them, and don't worry, it's not your turn yet, Old Ma said lightly. Divine glory of the space unleashed madly, shrouding the vast void. The great elder of the demon cloud became alert and soared into the sky. However, at the same moment, Blind Tai made his move in the void. That heavenly being, holding the divine hammer of the protector, directly smashing down into the space below. Boom! A dull thud resounded between heaven and earth. A destructive might swept down, blasting below, suppressing an entire land to wipe out everything within it. Watch out! The great elder of the demon cloud shouted, but he was waylaid by Old Ma, unable to stop the attack from Blind Tai. Mo Ku roared, and a demonic double seemed to have materialized, blocking above him. But the instant the divine light fell, the demonic shadow was crushed and pulverized. In the next moment, the force fell on Mo Ku, penetrating his physical body and his spiritual soul. No, Mo Ku looked extremely fearful and let out a miserable roar. In the next moment, his body was shattered immediately. It vanished like ash and smoke as his spiritual soul also collapsed. Under the attack of that power, he had no way to stop it at all. Unable to even stop a single blow, he was directly obliterated. His old acquaintance didn't say another word and didn't waste any time. But he was not the only one. In the vicinity, under the sweep of the divine light, all the cultivators from the demon cloud were wiped out, as each and every one of them disappeared as if they had never existed in the first place. Where the divine light passed, none survived. All were punished by death. Mo Ku, the great elder of the demon cloud clan, broke through Old Ma's defenses and looked down at the figure disappearing into thin air. His eyes were bloodshot, and power rolled out from him in violent waves. Mo Ku had been slain like this. He had been killed without a chance to react. And it was not only Mo Ku, other cultivators of the Demon Cloud clan had been killed by a single attack as well. They had all been slain. The great elder of the Demon Cloud clan raised his head and looked up at Blind Tai. His deep, dark eyes were filled to the brim with murderous intent. However, Blind Tai ignored him. This hammer had been his obsession for so many years, but he felt very little joy or appreciation in his heart. He felt only calm. In the past, he and Mo Ku had been very close and had called each other brothers. But he never would have thought that he was plotting against him. It was only through the divine art of spying that he had saved his own life. For so many years, he had dreamed that he would kill Mo Ku and get revenge one day. Now, he had finally done it. He had resolved a matter that he had held close to his heart. Futian and the others looked at Blind Tai and seemed to sense his state of mind. There was no sorrow there, no joy. Perhaps it was a kind of relief. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. If it had not been for the things that had happened back then, he probably would not have returned to the village, and his state of mind would not have been purified. And now, he would not have had the chance to reach the 9th tier of the Renhuang Plain. Everything had been decided by fate. Mo Ku had wasted his talents scheming back then, doing all that he could. And yet, a single hammer had still frightened him to death. So what did all the time he had spent back then matter in the end? Blind Tai faced towards where the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan was. He spat out his words, saying, "Uncle Ma, let me come over there." Old Ma and the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan were facing each other. He nodded when he heard Blind Tai's words, then moved off to the side, opening up a path to let him through. After he stepped aside, Blind Tai and the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan were facing each other. One was above the other people. Terrifying power of the great path was seeping out from both of them. "You were the one behind everything that happened back then. You made Mo Ku do it," said Blind Tai. His voice was still calm. It was as if he was not too concerned by all of this. It seemed like he just wanted to bring it to an end. Yes, the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan admitted openly. Of course they had been his orders. If it had not been for him, how could Mo Ku have done it? And how could he have succeeded? After all, Blind Tai had been no ordinary figure back then. Millimeter. Blind Tai said no more. He just nodded calmly. Neither of them liked to talk much. They obviously did not need to say very much either. This was a matter of life and death. One of the two of them would definitely die. But the one who would die would probably be the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan. With the cultivators around him, he had no way to slay Blind Tai. So the outcome already seemed to be decided. The great elder of the Demon Cloud clan would die. Actually, everyone understood that this made sense, including the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan. When the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy arrived, along with a person at the tribulation level, how could he hope to kill Blind Tai? Back during the battle of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, you said that the people of the Divine Prefecture were slaughtering each other. But now, you led the Heavenly Mandate Academy in a battle against the Upper Divine Prefecture. Excellent, said the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan coldly. But as he said this, he already felt a little bit timid. They had not even started fighting, and he was already feeling timid. That was why he had said that. Otherwise, the slaughter would have started. The great elder of the Demon Cloud clan understood his fate. This was a grudge between you and Four Corner Village. What did the Heavenly Mandate Academy have to do with it? Said Old Ma, sweeping his gaze over the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan. Back then, you ruined his eyes, almost killing him, and stole the divine item of Four Corner Village. What is wrong with us coming to repay our debts now? Why did people from the Heavenly Mandate Academy get involved in this dispute with Four Corner Village? Asked the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan, looking up in the curtain of stars in the sky. If it were not for that starry curtain, he would not have to make a last stand here. He could have escaped. Unfortunately for you, I am a member of the village. So, I naturally had the right to get involved in this affair, said Futian, looking at the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan from across the distance. The great elder of the Demon Cloud clan looked back at him. Surging demonic power swept out from him, filling the entire vast area with his demonic aura. Whoosh! The great elder of the Demon Cloud clan's body suddenly disappeared, transforming into a beam of demonic light that pierced through the air. Futian frowned. He could clearly feel a threatening will. Just as he was preparing to move, a figure descended beside him. It was Renhuang Chen, who was covered in starlight and transformed into a protective light curtain that wrapped around Futian. However, the beam of demonic light shot up into the sky, as if it had changed direction instantaneously, then rushed onward into the high distance. Clearly, the great elder of the demon cloud clan's target was not Futian. That had been a diversion so that he could escape the area. His anger and his murderous intent had been real, but his desire to survive by leaving was even more real. So the great elder of the demon cloud clan had not sought revenge, he had sought to flee. Bang! A booming sound split the air as a black hammer appeared up in the air and smashed into the curtain of stars, making cracks. That was naturally the great elder of the demon cloud clan's attack. He wanted to break open this forbidding power and flee the area that he was imprisoned in. But could he do it? The starlight that was upon Renhuang Chen flashed as he raised his scepter. Suddenly, brilliant starlight shot up straight into the air, repairing the places on the starlight curtain that had been damaged. In a flash, it was as good as new again. The repaired pieces seemed like they were a part of the original. If the great elder of the demon cloud clan tried to destroy it, it would be nearly impossible, as the difference in levels was too great. Just then, divine light burst forth, flowing between heaven and earth. A mighty divine force descended. The great elder of the demon cloud clan's expression changed as he looked over in that direction and saw that blind Tai seemed to have melded with the body of a god. His body was covered in golden armor, and unimaginable divine power was radiating from him. The great elder of the demon cloud clan could even sense a hint of the aura of a great emperor about him. Boom! A divine hammer fell from the sky, smashing into the great elder of the demon cloud clan. The terrifying amount of pressure made the space around him freeze. And the elder himself was no different as he sensed this supernatural power. It seems that your combat ability now measures among the greatest, uncle. That is incredible, said Futian as he looked at the divine light. As soon as he said this, the hammer fell again, and monstrous figures appeared in the air. But they could not block this attack. There was another loud booming sound, and the great elder of the demon cloud clan was sent flying backward. The space where he had been before seemed to split as the terrifying divine light raged through the air. Blind Tai seemed to have transformed into a god. He continued walking forward, swinging the hammer once again and slamming it into the great elder of the demon cloud clan as smoothly as flowing water. It was simple yet overpowering. He possessed limitless strength. Boom! Another dull boom rang out, and the air seemed to shatter as the great elder of the demon cloud clan was sent flying once again, blood pouring from his mouth. It seemed like he had been crushed and had no more power to resist. Chapter 2289, Thoughts. The great elder of the demon cloud clan was no weakling. On the contrary, he was one of the strongest figures in the Shangqing domain. He dominated his generation. But at that moment, blind Tai no longer seemed like a Renhuang who was close to breaking through to the 9th tier. In fact, he seemed like he had already done so many years ago and had developed his profound powers for a long time. What kind of power had the inheritance of the Imperial Star given him? Boom! Beams of burning divine radiance spread out from the figures of the gods of war up in the air, sweeping out through the heavens and the earth and covering a vast area. Many arms appeared up in the air. They were the arms of gods. The divine hammer of the protector appeared, and images of divine hammers appeared in all those arms right afterward. It seemed as if each hammer contained unimaginable power. They fell accompanied by divine light. The great elder of the demon cloud clan, the top cultivator of the demon cloud clan, could sense a deadly threat. He had a strange feeling. It was like he was not facing blind Tai but an actual god. The great elder of the demon cloud clan had swept away all before him and had never been in such desperate circumstances before. Someone younger than him had reached his level. Although he had just broken through to this level, he was still able to crush him. He had beaten him from head to toe and had made it so that he had not even been able to unleash his own power. What kind of humiliation was this? But the current humiliation was nothing. As of right now, his very life was in danger. The area was sealed off, and so he could not escape. He would truly be smashed to death by blind Tai's hammers here. Boom! The hammers crashed down, and the heavens and the earth shook. It seemed as if everything would be destroyed. There came a great roaring sound from the great elder of the demon cloud clan's body as the image of a demon god appeared behind him. Its many demonic arms reached up into the sky. The demonic handprints were incomparably powerful by themselves, and many of the arms held great black divine hammers. They moved away from him, smashing into the air and causing beams of black light to appear. The golden hammers fell, and the two forces collided together. Infinite divine light exploded outward when they clashed. It seemed as if the earth and the sky would split open. The demonic arms were all shattered wildly as the giant hammer went among them and destroyed everything. Bang! As this attack fell, it seemed as if everything was flattened. The great elder of the demon cloud clan was sent flying once again. His aura wavered, and his face had grown pale. His aura of the great path was no longer as sturdy as it had been. But the images of even more divine hammers appeared in the air, covering the sky in all directions. Blind Tai, who had transformed into a form like that of a god, was filled with limitless power. It was like the will of a great emperor had infused his strength. He had transformed into the master of this land. He waved his arms, and the hammers danced once again. His movements were still simple and graceful, but the divine power that burst forth in the air was still enough to shock even the greatest of figures. Countless beams of light all fell towards the same place. The figure of the demonic god tried to block them, but as the light fell, the hammers smashed down as well. Suddenly, the demonic figure split open and shattered. The hammers continued downward and smashed into the great elder of the demon cloud clan's body. He was an incredibly powerful figure, and his flesh had already become the way. So even suffering a direct hit from these hammers was not enough to instantly kill him. But his body shook violently, and the hammers kept on coming, slamming into him over and over again. His expression kept changing. It was as if he was full of regret. Then, divine light pierced his body. As the countless beams of light shot through him, the great elder's body started to disintegrate until he was destroyed. He had been killed on the spot. After the great elder had been slain, everything seemed to become calm. The violent atmosphere dissipated, and everything was like it had been before. Blind Tai stood calmly up in the sky. He still felt none of the pleasure of his great vengeance. On the outside, he looked extremely calm. After a period of silence, he turned and walked calmly over to Yi Futian's side as if none of what had just transpired had happened. "Congratulations, Uncle Tai," said Yi Futian with a slight smile. Now, Blind Tai would be able to let go of his heart's obsession. He, the people of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and the people of Four Corner Village had all watched this battle but had not interfered. They had let Blind Tai achieve his own vengeance. And he had succeeded. He had used his overwhelming strength to slaughter the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan, Mo Ku, and more, resolving his grudge from many years ago. Old Ma and the others came over, patting Blind Tai on the shoulder. They had been greatly shocked by this battle as well. Even Old Ma had not been able to deal with the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan, but Blind Tai had crushed him all by himself. Moreover, the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan had had no power to resist him. He had been overpowered and destroyed. From this, it could be seen that Blind Tai had now become much more powerful than Old Ma. It looked like the inheritance of the Imperial Star was far from ordinary. It had given Blind Tai combat abilities beyond those of people on his level. He had been able to slay the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan, who had been at the peak of the Renhuang Plain for many years. At that moment, the curtain of starlight dissipated. Many cultivators appeared in different places up in the air. They had come from different camps. All of them were top figures from the Divine Prefecture. After sensing the battle that was taking place here, the top figures from the Central Imperial Realm had come to observe the battle. All of them had been shocked by what happened. Blind Tai of Four Corner Village had broken through to the next level. Not only had he done that, but he had killed the great elder of the Demon Cloud Clan right out. It seemed like the inheritance of the Imperial Star had given him much. Unfortunately, the cultivation court of Great Emperor Ziwei was already under Yi Futian's control. They could not go there to cultivate. Yi Futian and the others transformed into beams of light and soon disappeared. But the cultivators from the divine prefecture did not leave. Instead, they watched down below. One of the top powers of the Shangqing domain had been destroyed like this and would never return. A group of people was gathering together up in the sky. These were cultivators from the Shangqing domain, including Emperor Ju, the vice chief. In addition, cultivators from the Nanhai family were there too. The Demon Cloud clan had been a top force of the Shangqing domain, and yet it had been destroyed like this. The shock that this gave them was very fierce indeed. Moreover, the one who had destroyed them was Blind Tai of Four Corner Village, and many of the forces of the Shangqing domain had conflicts with Four Corner Village. They had once gone and laid siege to it until they were forced to flee by the master. The cultivators of the Nanhai family were even more conflicted. Now, Futian had led Blind Tai and the others to destroy the Demon Cloud clan. Afterward, would he want to destroy them as well? A group of people from the Muyun family was there as well. They had seen Blind Tai become an even more powerful figure and slay the great elder of the Demon Cloud clan. It was obvious how they felt about this. Muyun Lan had once fought Blind Tai in the Shangqing domain, and their powers had been evenly matched. But now, if Muyun Lan stood before Blind Tai, he would not even be able to withstand a single hammer blow. Chapter 2290, Visitors. After slaying the great elder of Demon Cloud, Futian and the others returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but the incident had caused quite a stir in the original realm. Many top figures from the Central Emperor realm had paid close attention to the battle, and the news spread rapidly. In Heavenly Mandate Academy, Futian and the others had just returned. Before they had a chance to depart to the Ziwei Segmentum, they were informed that some visitors had arrived to request a meeting with him. In front of the main hall, Futian scanned with his divine consciousness and saw a group of people outside the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Seeing their presence, Futian frowned. Likewise, Old Ma and Blind Tai also raised their eyebrows. Then, Old Ma huffed contemptuously and said, "What are they doing here? Since they are here already, tell them to come in." Futian didn't seem to care and gave the instruction casually. Immediately, someone went to carry out the order. After a while, someone came around, and Futian saw that the person was Muyun Long. Behind him was Muyun Lan, but he appeared unenthusiastic. Both of his hands were folded behind him as he looked toward Futian and Blind Tai. His expression appeared somewhat conflicted. "How dare you show your faces here?" Fangari said sarcastically, looking at Muyun Long. All the discords in the past were caused by Muyun Long, otherwise they would still be cultivating in the village, and there would be no subsequent events. Muyun Long was full of ambition, wanting to take over the village, even having the idea to replace the teacher. But now, that ambition appeared rather ludicrous. Just Muyun Long alone wanted to replace the teacher. The teacher was the totem of the village, its true spiritual leader. As long as he was there, Four Corner Village would always be what it always had been, and no one would challenge it. In fact, Muyun Long was very embarrassed as well, but he came despite this. He had seen the teacher descended on the land of the original realm and took control of Xinjia the Great Emperor, erupting with shocking combat power. When some had guessed that the teacher was in the imperial realm, he was greatly shocked and then taken over by endless regrets. It was ridiculous that they rebelled against Four Corner Village and left, and even more ridiculous that he had once wanted to replace the teacher in the village. Now, they had witnessed Blind Tai's breakthrough and ascension to the peak of Renhuang. Muyun Long's cultivation was far deeper than Blind Tai's, even his eldest, Muyun Lan, whose cultivation was not beneath that of Blind Tai. In the battle at the Shangqing domain, though he was unable to suppress Blind Tai, the score was pretty even. However, the gap had been widened now. Understandably, he was agitated by how things turned out. If they were still cultivating in the village, the teacher and the imperial star in the starry sky world could be used to communicate and comprehend. But not only did they leave the village, but they had also created this grudge with Futian. The death of the great elder of the Demon Cloud was a warning to them. Therefore, this trip at this time was inevitable. What if Futian were to seek revenge from them in the future? With the strength that Heavenly Mandate Academy possessed today, even the Nanhai family could ill afford its ire. With Futian's personality, It was a real possibility that he would eventually end up at their front door, seeking revenge. What happened at the beginning was indeed my fault, I admit it. However, we are all people from the village and belong to the same line, after all. No one can dispute this. Old Ma, for the sake of our friendship these many years, would you allow me to ask for forgiveness from the teacher? I am willing to return to the village to cultivate, Mu Yunlong pleaded, seeking to bolster his request with their relationship once upon a time. However, everyone knew where he was coming from. It was only to seek better resources to cultivate. In addition, he may be scared of Yi Futian at this moment, fearing his tendency to settle old scores. You left when you wanted to, and now you are asking to come back because you wanted to. What kind of place do you think our village is? Old Ma said quite sarcastically. At that time, Mu Yunlong and the others had wanted to take Yi Futian down and had attacked him. Mu Yunlong's youngest, Mu Yunshu, was even more outrageous. He had attempted to deal fatal blows to blind Tai's son, Tai Tu, without mercy. And Mu Yunlan himself was a son-in-law of the Nanhai family. Now, he wanted to return to the village. I know we have offended. But we are in the same line after all. If the teacher wants to punish us, we will accept it. In the future, we are willing to listen to all of you, no matter what. Mu Yunlong still bowed his head and admitted his past guilt. He had put down his dignity to be allowed to return to the village. Yi Futian looked at Mu Yunlan behind him and saw that he was standing quietly without saying a word. Obviously, it was not his idea to come and own up their guilt, but that he was dragged here by Mu Yunlong. Otherwise, Mu Yunlan's arrogant nature would never allow him to come here and bow his head like this. After all, even lowering their stance was no guarantee of the results. As if he had detected Yi Futian's gaze, Mu Yunlan looked at him as well and saw that in the depth of Yi Futian's eyes, there was extreme tranquility without the slightest emotion in those eyes of his. It was as if he cared not at all for his existence. The look was familiar enough. Once, this was exactly how he looked at Yi Futian. It was an indifferent and careless look. Now, it was Yi Futian who regarded him thusly. Now in Yi Futian's eyes, Mu Yunlan was nothing. Aside from the power controlled in Yi Futian's hands, Yi Futian's own combat effectiveness was so strong that Mu Yunlan might not be able to contend with him. Yi Futian's sight slowly settled on Mu Yunlong, and he said, "First, bring Mu Yunshu and abolish his cultivation. Show me the sincerity of the Mu Yun clan." Mu Yunlong's eyes sharpened as the expression on his face changed suddenly. Not just him, but Mu Yunlan behind him also regarded Yi Futian with a cold expression. Did he ask them to abolish Mu Yunshu's cultivation? How could they possibly agree to it? Emperor Yi, we are sincerely sorry for what had transpired. You needn't be so harsh, Mu Yunlong replied. I am being quite sincere. Yi Futian looked at Mu Yunlong. I won't mention what you did back then, but your youngest, Mu Yunshu, being so cruel and plotting at such a tender age, how could we let him back in the village to cultivate without abolishing his cultivation? You don't really think we wanted to raise another you, did you? Yi Futian's voice was calm enough, but the indifference in his words was very obvious. Clearly, it was impossible. Sorry to have bothered you, Mu Yunlong said. He turned to leave. If there is a chance in the future, I will return the visit to the Mu Yun clan, Yi Futian said casually, causing Mu Yunlong to stop abruptly. After pausing for a few moments, he started moving again to leave, this time with some heaviness in his footsteps. What Yi Futian said was rather potent with meaning and significance. After Mu Yunlong left, someone came to report again. Many forces from the Divine Prefecture are outside asking to be received. Yi Futian's divine consciousness radiated outside of the Heavenly Mandate Academy and saw the arrival of many top forces, which surprised him a little. It seemed that this was all caused by that battle. He never expected Uncle Tai's breakthrough would have such an impact on the top forces in the Divine Prefecture. It appeared that they had some thoughts of their own about this turn of events. After all, it was tough to produce a figure at the giant level. This was already a cultivator standing at the top in Divine Prefecture. Chapter 2291, For the Divine Prefecture. Everyone, welcome, Yi Futian said loudly. His voice reverberated throughout the space. Outside the Heavenly Mandate Academy, several cultivators from various top forces gradually made their way into the academy after they heard his words. They gathered at the main hall. Futian scanned the crowd. There were quite a few familiar faces from some forces of the Shangqing domain. Zhu Muhuang, the vice-chief of Domain Chief's manor, and Princess Zhu Lingxi had come too. Zhu Muhuang looked at Futian, who stood in front of the main hall. He felt that he was fortune's fool. In the past, he intended to recruit Futian when the Shangqing Domain Chief's manor gathered all the talented cultivators. He wanted to keep Futian under the control of the Domain Chief's manor so that Futian would be under his command. At that time, Futian was but a Ren Huang with extraordinary talent. However, judging from the current situation, Futian's status was no longer beneath his status as the vice-chief of the Shangqing Domain Chief's manor. Furthermore, Futian was superior to him. After all, the manor itself was the only force under the direct command of the Shangqing Domain Chief's manor. On the other hand, the Heavenly Mandate Academy, led by Futian, controlled all the forces in the original realm. The Ziwei Segmentum was under his command too. Besides that, all the cultivators from Four Corner Village were willing to follow him. Combining all these forces, it was obvious that Futian was leading a superpower. Moreover, Futian was supported by the mysterious master. Hence, Futian's current status was above that of Zhu Muhuang. When Zhu Muhuang visited the Heavenly Mandate Academy, he needed to wait for the host's approval before he could pay his tribute. Aside from him, all the cultivators from the various top forces of the Divine Prefecture also needed to wait for the approval of Futian to enter the academy this time. No one dared to barge into the place without an invitation. Not long ago, Futian and his team killed many powerful cultivators from the Demon Cloud, including Mo Ku and the Great Elder of the clan. Even Zhu Muhuang, the ruler of Shangqing Domain Chief's manor, did not dare to comment much on this matter. Now, most likely, nobody in the Divine Prefecture could command Futian. Not to mention that the matter involved personal vengeance. Outsiders had no stance in the vendetta between the Demon Cloud and Blind Tai. All of you have traveled far to visit the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Please excuse me for not welcoming all of you sooner, Futian said to everyone while bowing slightly. He was polite, and he spoke humbly. However, his humble speech also made people feel distant. Zhu Lingxi, who stood beside Zhu Muhuang, lamented internally. Back then, the Domain Chief's manor intended to use her to keep Futian around. However, he did not show the slightest interest in her at all. If the Domain Chief's manor had been more sincere in making friends with Futian, then they would have at least been on good terms with him now. If that were the case, it would most likely not be a problem for their manor to want to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court. After all, the ancient royal family of Duan was already cultivating there at the moment. Ren Huangyi, you're too kind. We've come to ask for a favor, said a top figure. Their attitude toward Futian now had changed completely. Even the giant-level cultivators spoke courteously and dared not act imprudently. After all, Futian now possessed the power to determine whether the giant-level figures lived or died. Oh! Futian raised his brows slightly and asked, what matter is Senior referring to? He was clearly asking an obvious question. Everyone knew that Futian was well aware of their purpose for coming here. We wish to have access to the Starry Cultivation Court for cultivation, said the giant-level figure. Right now, Ren Huangyi has taken charge of the Starry Cultivation Court and can borrow the power of the will of the Great Emperor. If you would allow the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture to cultivate there, the overall abilities of the Divine Prefecture would improve. Your contribution would be significant. Of course, we'll not use the Starry Cultivation Court for free. We will pay an equivalent price in exchange for such access. Ren Huangyi can also name a price. How about it? Futian smiled at the other party and said, Senior, have you opened up the holy land of cultivation of your clan or force to the other forces from the outside world and the Divine Prefecture? I am sure that the members of the other forces will also be willing to pay to do so. Currently, the Starry Cultivation Court was under his control. It was considered to be his personal holy land of cultivation. Why would he allow others to cultivate in it? Yi Futian was not so selfless. He had also allowed all the forces to use the Starry Cultivation Court back during the battle of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. As long as the forces were willing to join the battle and fight for the Heavenly Mandate Academy, they would be permitted to cultivate there at any time. However, none of the major forces were willing to stand out for them. Conversely, they were greedily eyeing the Starry Cultivation Court. All of them wanted to add insult to injury. By killing him and destroying the Heavenly Mandate Academy, they would naturally obtain the teachings of Great Emperor Ziwei and the Starry Cultivation Court. Now that the situation had changed, they wanted permission to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court. Wasn't this too easy? The giant-level figure continued, I understand where Ren Huangyi is coming from. This is indeed a great request. All of us are part of the Divine Prefecture. Now that turmoil is imminent, improving the abilities of the forces of the Divine Prefecture to combat the invasion of outside forces will be considered a great contribution by Ren Huangyi. Moreover, all of us are willing to pay a high price in exchange for such access. The other members also nodded in agreement. In the future, if Ren Huangyi requires any assistance, you will only need to issue the command. The cultivators of the various forces of the Divine Prefecture will willingly provide aid. Wouldn't that be perfect? Someone else added, promising these things. However, if such a time truly came, whether or not the other party would lend their aid remained unclear. Yi Futian smiled. Were they pressuring him to act for the greater good of the Divine Prefecture? All right, replied Yi Futian. When he thought about this, he actually nodded his head and agreed. This stunned the various cultivators. Some of them gave Yi Futian suspicious looks. Yi Futian seemed to have agreed too easily. Although this was their original goal, they never imagined that Yi Futian would agree so readily. Things were likely not as they seemed. As expected, Yi Futian looked at them with a smile and continued saying, since everyone has requested it, I will naturally not have any objection against the suggestion. Everything is for the sake of the Divine Prefecture. However, the original realm is also part of the Divine Prefecture. Since everyone has the same goal in mind, I'm sure all of you have heard of what happened recently. A force from the Dark World is committing massacres in the original realm. They have lost their humanity. I am determined to cast the Dark World out of the original realm. Are seniors willing to follow me and wage war against the Dark World? After Yi Futian said that, he scanned the crowd and concluded, this is for the greater good of the Divine Prefecture. The cultivators were stunned when they heard Yi Futian's words. Then, all of them fell silent. For the greater good of the Divine Prefecture? They were definitely not righteous, they were merely serving their own interests. The forces of the Dark World were very powerful. Currently, more and more top forces from the Dark World were descending upon the original realm. If the cultivators immediately declared war on them, it would be a matter of life or death. It would no longer be as simple as paying a high fee. The price might be their own lives. Hence, no one dared to agree to this so easily. After all, from the last battle, they knew that the Dark Court was cautious of Yi Futian. If the forces from the Divine Prefecture were to go on the initiative and declare war, the cultivators of the Dark World would most likely deal with them first. What's the matter? The forces of the Dark World are so cruel. Seniors, don't all of you want to expel them from our lands? Yi Futian continued pressuring them. His manner was imposing. Zhu Muhuang clearly sensed that the current Yi Futian was different from what he was before. In the past, even though Yi Futian had extraordinary talents, he was but a Ren Huang who had exceptional combat abilities in the Divine Prefecture. There were plenty of top forces in the Divine Prefecture. Therefore, no matter how monstrous he was still insignificant. However, it was different now. Yi Futian was no longer just an extraordinary talent himself. His background and the forces he commanded were all among the finest. There were not many forces in the Divine Prefecture who could afford to offend him. Hence, his entire temperament naturally seemed different. Even among the 18 domain chief manners, more than half of them did not command forces as powerful as those below Yi Futian. Only the domain chief manners with chiefs who had survived the second stage of a divine tribulation dared to claim that they could suppress Yi Futian and the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Even then, Four Corner Village still had a mysterious master to hold down the fort. With such a background, even against all the top forces of the divine prefecture, Yi Futian's manner was still imposing. Nevertheless, the crowd knew that Yi Futian had sought the aid of the forces of the divine prefecture during the battle of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Unfortunately, not many of them stood out to lend him aid. Many forces had even tried to kick him when he was down. Under such circumstances, they still came here seeking Yi Futian for permission to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court. He would naturally not act kindly towards them. Someone said, "Of course, we want to cast the forces of the dark world out, too." However, the forces of the dark world are different from the forces in the divine prefecture. They are very united. The Dark Court rules over all the forces in the dark world directly. Recently, more and more top forces from the dark world have arrived in the original realm. Their lineup is as powerful as that of the divine prefecture. It is not that simple to want to chase them out. Before we declare war against them, why don't we unite the forces in the divine prefecture and improve our abilities by cultivating in the Starry Cultivation Court first? Yi Futian glanced at the person who had spoken. The other party's words sounded reasonable, but in the end, he also wanted to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court first. No one could guarantee what would happen after these cultivators gained the right to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court. "I disagree," Yi Futian refuted. "Pardon me for speaking my mind frankly. Last time, when the Heavenly Mandate Academy was attacked, many forces from the Divine Prefecture were also waiting for the chance to join in the attack against me. Most likely, many of you wanted to kill me. I can't tell for sure what everyone is thinking. If I allow all of you to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court, but you end up becoming my enemies, wouldn't I be foolish for inviting trouble upon myself? Since seniors are interested in allying with me, then you should show some sincerity first." Yi Futian's speech caused the cultivators to fall silent. From the looks of it, Yi Futian was firm with his decision. If they wanted to gain access to the Starry Cultivation Court for cultivating, they had to first join forces with him to eradicate the forces of the dark world lurking in the original realm. Otherwise, he would not agree to their request. Last time, when all the forces went to visit Ziwei Imperial Palace in the Ziwei Segmentum together, the latter had no choice but to allow them to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court. However, it was different now with Yi Futian in charge. They would most likely be unable to force him into accepting their request. It was because Master served as a deterrent. "Since that's the case, we'll further consider your suggestion," said someone. Clearly, the person thought that the price they had to pay to cultivate in the Starry Cultivation Court was too high. It was not worth it. Hence, the person was giving up. Right at the moment, quite a lot of people arrived. They actually traversed the space and entered into the Heavenly Mandate Academy directly. Naturally, this caused Yi Futian and the cultivators of the academy to frown. The incomers had serious expressions on their faces. They went straight to their respective forces and reported something to their seniors using transmitted thoughts. It seemed like something had happened. Someone also landed beside Yi Futian and told him something using transmitted thoughts. The news caused Yi Futian to narrow his eyes. One by one, the cultivators from the various top forces of the Divine Prefecture saluted their fists and said, "Farewell." After they said this, they immediately flew up to the sky and left. What happened? Lord Taishian revealed a worried expression. The person who just communicated with Yi Futian through transmitted thoughts was a cultivator from Ziwei Imperial Palace. From the looks of it, something had happened. Otherwise, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture would not have left together. Most likely, they had also received the same news. Many people looked at Yi Futian. Yi Futian said, "In a void space outside of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, someone discovered a relic. According to speculation, it is a very ancient relic." The eyes of the cultivators narrowed when they heard Yi Futian's words. No wonder the visitors from the Divine Prefecture left in a hurry. Clearly, they had received the same news and decided to check out the relic immediately. The original realm was a void space formed after the collapse of the Heavenly Path. It was also called the Void Realm. However, It also became a unique place that consisted of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path and countless void spaces. Nobody knew what lay in these void spaces. Many years ago, people had searched through and plundered the void spaces. Nevertheless, there was bound to be something that they missed. For example, all 9 supreme realms had their secrets. The Ziwei segmentum, which was sealed by Great Emperor Ziwei, was hidden in the Ziwei realm. The original realm had recently undergone a complete transformation. More and more changes were occurring. Hence, the appearance of an ancient relic didn't seem bizarre. "Do you have the coordinates of the relic?" someone asked. The void space outside of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path was vast and endless. The Ziwei segmentum, for example, was very far from the 9 realms. Hence, they had to build a powerful grand teleportation matrix to connect the 2 places. The cultivator from Ziwei Imperial Palace replied, "Yes." The relic was discovered by some mighty cultivators from the top forces of the Divine Prefecture. Besides that, it was discovered because it was approaching the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Right now, most likely, a lot of people have caught news of its existence. The forces from the Divine Prefecture that visited the Heavenly Mandate Academy just now were only part of those who had come to the original realm. Many of them are making their way to the relic now. "A moving relic?" Futian nodded and said, "Let's go and have a look." After he said this, the group flew up to the sky right away. The cultivator from Ziwei Imperial Palace led the way, and they left the Heavenly Mandate realm. They traveled towards a specific direction in the void. After a while, they had left the region where the 9 supreme realms were. As they progressed forward in the void space, Futian and his group could gradually sense an unknown power. The power seemed to contain a faint might. It was as though heavenly might was transmitted across space to where they were. The power became clearer as they approached the space. Even the giant-level figures could feel a super strong pressure acting on them. "This might," exclaimed Lord Taishen. This unknown might gave off the same vibe as when they were cultivating in the starry cultivation court in the Ziwei segmentum. Could it be that this was yet another ancient relic left by a great emperor? As they moved upwards, they discovered that a deep and scary-looking crack had appeared in the sky. A frightening storm formed. The crack was like a terrifying object that would leave marks in the space when it moved. Looking past the crack into the distance, one could faintly sense an extremely menacing power was moving. As expected, it was a moving ancient relic, and it was approaching the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. What exactly was it? It gave off such frightening pressure. Chapter 2293, Relic of a Great Emperor? Let's go. The cultivators moved towards the direction where the might was emanating from. They traveled across space at an astonishing speed. As they approached the source of the might, they could sense the terrifying might intensifying. Rumbling sounds could faintly be heard in the void space. The massive crack remained in the void as they ventured past it. As various cultivators moved closer and closer to the source of the might, they even discovered dark fissures. "It's over there," exclaimed someone as they looked ahead in the direction where the terrifying aura was. All the cultivators narrowed their eyes. They saw a gigantic creature moving. There seemed to be a city built on top of the creature's back. It was moving in a specific direction. Everywhere it passed, the space was ripped apart, and dark fissures were formed. When the dark fissures closed up, they became massive cracks. Right at this moment, Futian and his group saw an astonishing divine light of the Great Path light up in front of the moving creature. There was more than one beam of light. Dazzling divine lights of the Great Path were ignited simultaneously in different directions. Then, all the lights pounced onto the gigantic creature, attempting to stop it from moving. Frightening rumbles thundered. The divine lights, which blocked in front of the enormous creature, were shattered into dust. The attack of the cultivators could not stop the creature from advancing. This was not the first time the cultivators tried to stop the creature in its tracks. They had been trying different techniques along the way, but all their attempts were futile. It was unstoppable. "Let's give up on making it stop," someone at the front suggested. The cultivators realized that making the creature stop was an impossible mission. The rest nodded in agreement. Then, the cultivators stepped up and headed towards the city on top of the creature. Since it was impossible to intercept the creature from advancing, they could only get on it to explore the city on its back while it was still moving. Futian and the rest of the cultivators from various forces of the divine prefecture also arrived where the creature was. Aside from them, the forces of the dark world and the empty divine realm also caught news of this relic, and they gradually appeared from various directions. All their gazes were fixed on the gigantic moving creature. Their hearts trembled violently. The moving creature was a black turtle. With high speed, Futian and his group caught up with the creature. They noticed that this creature carrying a city on its back was actually an enormous demonic beast. It was a black turtle. However, its head took the shape of a dragon head. It's a dragon turtle. But it seems to be dead. It has no aura, commented Renhuang Chen, who was beside Futian. Futian also noticed that the creature was a colossal dragon turtle. However, its body was pitch black, with no signs of life. A mysterious power must be sustaining it for it to be able to keep moving. Not only was this black turtle dead, but the city it carried on its back was also filled with the aura of death. There was no sign of life. However, one could still sense a baffling might emanating from the city. It was an extremely domineering might. Futian had witnessed the abilities of many great emperor-level cultivators and experienced firsthand the pressure contained within their wills. He was certain that the pressure before him was from the will of a great emperor right now. That meant to say that the moving fortress was a relic left behind by a great emperor. The will of the great emperor might still be lingering in the city. Many other cultivators naturally shared the same speculation as Futian. However, the dragon turtle emanated a mysterious pressure as it advanced while tearing apart the space. There was a solemn pressure acting on the crowd, making it hard for them to breathe. Right at this moment, the dragon turtle suddenly let out a dull groan. It sounded like a sorrowful wail. The reverberation of the sound caused the blood and chi of the cultivators to churn. An intense sadness welled up in their chests. It was as though they could sense the despair in the voice of the dragon turtle. What kind of emotion was that? The hearts of the cultivators trembled violently. This dragon turtle was most likely a black turtle. Such a domineering sacred beast actually let out a groan which contained such an immense sorrow after it had died. What had actually happened before it died? Buzz. Endless starlight lit up in the heavens and earth, transforming into a starry shroud. The shroud of starlight popped up out of thin air. It was created by Renhuang Chen. He wanted to give it a try and see whether he could block the dragon turtle from advancing. The body of the dragon turtle crashed head-on to the shroud of starlight. Catcher! A shattering sound rang. Without any suspense, the shroud of starlight was shattered into dust. The dragon turtle continued to move forward as though it had not encountered any hindrance. It seemed as though there was no power great enough to stop its will from advancing. Was it the will of the dragon turtle itself? It looks like we don't need to waste our energy on making it stop. It's unstoppable, concluded Renhuang Chen, who was beside Futian. Renhuang Chen had only tried once, and he was certain about the creature's capability. Futian nodded in agreement. With a flash, he dashed towards the ancient city on the dragon turtle's back. Futian and his group landed on a ruin. They were surrounded by dilapidated pillars and crumbling walls. There was not an area that was in good shape. They could sense a much stronger might now that they were standing on the ruin. Futian had a slight problem breathing normally when pressured by this might. The divine light of the great path flowed around his body, and his emperor's light twinkled, slowly withstanding the mysterious might. After he stabilized himself, his will swept out and scanned the surroundings. What's that? As they looked ahead at the center of the ruin, they saw a tall pile. It was like a tower. The mysterious might emanated from it. All the cultivators from various forces were making their way towards the tall pile. There seemed to be a weak light glowing inside the tower-shaped object. As the cultivators approached it, some of them launched attacks against it. The tower-shaped object shook when the intense attacks landed on it. However, it was not destroyed and still stood firmly. Yet another grating groan of sorrow sounded. The dragon turtle wailed again. The vibration of the sound caused the cultivators to feel restless. Weak light continued to glow on the tower-shaped object, further provoking the curiosity of the cultivators. "Let's attack together," suggested someone. Immediately, from various directions, the cultivators worked together to gather a frightening amount of power of the Great Path. "Back down first," Renhuang Chen instructed Yi Futian. Renhuang Chen stood in front of the group, and a defensive light shroud was activated. At the same time, the cultivators once again launched an aggressive attack towards the tower-shaped object. This time, it finally shook violently when many attacks landed on it at the same time. Unable to withstand the vibrations, boulders started falling from the tower. It seemed as though it would crumble at any moment. Many gazes were fixed on the tower. The eyes of some cultivators narrowed in shock when the boulders fell. "Those are," exclaimed someone. After the boulders fell, there were actually human bodies stacked in the tower-shaped object. However, the bodies showed no signs of life. They were corpses. All the bodies in the tower seemed as though they had been here for an eternity. "This is a grave," someone said in a low voice as they looked at the tower-shaped object. Their hearts trembled intensely. A black turtle was moving around in the void space bearing a grave on its back. Whose grave was it? Who was buried inside? Chapter 2294, Awakened Corpse. Terrifying storms continued to blow past the cultivators. When the black turtle tore apart space, fissures formed, and destructive storms continually surged out from them. The howling storms affected the cultivators. This was the reason why they attempted to stop the dragon turtle from moving just now. Unfortunately, up until now, no one was successful in making it stop. It was as though it had been moving in the vast void space since time immemorial. All the cultivators were shrouded with the divine light of the Great Path. Their gazes were fixed on the corpses in front of them. Many of the dead bodies were deformed, some only had tiny sections left. One could imagine the intensity of the battle they were involved in before they perished here. Even on this day, countless years after the battle, the dead black turtle was still wandering in space aimlessly with these dead bodies on its back. Nobody knew where this black turtle was heading. Everyone felt uncomfortable, as they were exposed to the destructive storms. Despite that, they still launched attack after attack at the tower-shaped grave. They were interested in opening up the grave and exploring the secrets hidden within. The powerful might, which instilled fear in everyone, emanated from within it. There might be an emperor-level corpse hidden within the pile. Perhaps, the corpse was similar to the body of Shenjia the Great. The black turtle continued to let out sorrowful wails, affecting the cultivators. Right at this moment, a faint aura could be sensed from the tower-shaped grave. The faint light brightened slightly. Then, under the shocking gazes of all the cultivators, the rest of the corpses glowed and started moving. Some of the corpses floated in midair. At this moment, the cultivators who stood on the black turtle felt that they were being watched. It was a peculiar sensation. Before their eyes were indeed lifeless corpses, however, the corpses now gave off a vibe as though they were alive. The situation of the corpses was similar to that of the black turtle. It was undoubtedly dead, but it could continue moving while carrying this ruin on its back. Buzz! The corpses suddenly charged towards the cultivators. All the corpses seemed to have come alive. The eyes of some corpses, which had been closed for a long time, suddenly opened and emitted creepy light. "Be careful," Renhuang Chen warned the surrounding cultivators. The gazes of the cultivators from various forces turned serious. These corpses actually moved and pounced on them. Who was controlling them? Accompanying the sorrowful wail of the dragon turtle, the corpses lunged at the cultivators. More than 10 corpses pounced in the direction where Yi Futian and his group were. The speed of the corpses was astonishing. They were practically crashing towards them. A cultivator from Ziwei Imperial Palace, who stood in front, punched the space in front of him. Instantly, starlight circulated and shot outwards. The corpses crashed head-on into the starlight. Loud rumbles thundered. A few corpses were shattered into pieces, but some corpses managed to force their way past the gigantic stars. The collision between the corpses and the stars caused the stars to crumble continuously. The corpses were so powerful. The giant-level figure was shocked. The corpses actually broke through his attack. If they were so powerful even as corpses, what level were these people at when they were still alive? Most likely, all the cultivators buried in this tower-shaped grave had not been simple beings. Old Ma and the rest also unleashed their divine light of the great path to withstand the incoming corpses. However, the corpses ignored all resistance and continued to press forward. They were lifeless and were not afraid of death, so they kept pushing forward. Many countermeasures set up by the cultivators were destroyed by the terrifying push from the corpses. Futian and his group were not the only ones being attacked. More and more corpses buried in the tower-shaped grave surged out and rushed towards different directions. The number of the attacking corpses was increasing. They were like an army of reapers. It was a frightening scene to behold. Buzz. Starlight screens appeared all around, with Futian and his group as the center. Renhuang Chen raised his scepter. The surrounding space became his absolute domain. More and more cracks appeared on the tower-shaped grave, and more corpses joined in the attack against the cultivators. However, all of them were blocked outside the screens. None of them could break through Renhuang Chen's defense. Even so, the corpses still slammed themselves relentlessly on the screens, causing the screens to vibrate. At this moment, the sorrowful wail of the black turtle intensified. Futian looked ahead and saw that, from within the grave, beams of divine halo shone. The halos transformed into a unique rhythm. The rhythm was permeated with immense sadness. Boom! A loud thud sounded, and another corpse appeared. This corpse was not deformed. He was garbed in blue robes. His hair was actually still jet black in color, untainted by the passing of time. The rhythm surged out from the grave and permeated into the blue-robed corpse. Immediately, the corpse opened its eyes as though it had been awakened. His jet-black hair danced violently in the air. In different directions, a few other corpses that were at the same level as the blue-robed corpse appeared. The pressure emanated by these corpses was enough to make the giant-level figures from various forces feel threatened. Be careful. These corpses were existences that had survived divine tribulations of the Great Path when they were alive. A solemn voice rang, warning all the cultivators to beware of these newly awakened corpses. The capabilities of these corpses were unfathomable. A beam of blue light flashed, and the blue-robed corpse sprang in the direction where Futian and his group were. His speed was shocking. He extended his arms and sent out a palm strike against the starlight screens that materialized from Renhuang Chen's power of the Great Path. The starlight screens shook fiercely upon the impact. Then, cracks appeared on the screens. The facial expressions of Renhuang Chen and the rest changed. These corpses were insanely powerful. Since the city on the Black Turtle's back was in a dilapidated state, the Black Turtle had most likely wandered around in the void space for a very long time. However, after so many years, not only were the corpses still in good condition, even the clothes that they were wearing also did not decay. Now, the corpses moved as though they had been resuscitated. The situation was too bizarre. Rumble. More and more cracks formed on the screens. Renhuang Chen raised his scepter and pointed it forward. With a loud bang, the starlight screens shattered into pieces. The screens were replaced with a gigantic starry divine sword, which charged straight towards the blue-robed corpse. The blue-robed corpse showed no intention of dodging the sword. He actually used his bare hand to grab the sword. The momentum of the divine sword caused the corpse to be pushed backward. However, at the same time, the divine sword was also disintegrating bit by bit. Futian stood motionlessly at his spot. He was carefully listening. There was a rhythm playing. He heard a rhythmic sound coming out from the grave, affecting the corpses. It seemed like the corpses were awakened and gained their fighting spirit from the rhythm. Futian listened to the rhythm attentively. It was a vehemently sorrowful rhythm. The wail of the dragon turtle echoed the rhythm. As Futian listened, an intense grief welled up inside of him as well. It was as though he had no control over his feelings. Who is playing this rhythm? Futian wondered as he stared at the grave ahead. What exactly was hidden inside the grave? I need to make a trip. Uncle Ma, please keep me company, Futian said out loud all of a sudden. Old Ma looked at him and nodded. A dazzling light shone on Futian. Then, he actually entered into a dark fissure formed from the space tearing. Old Ma followed closely behind him. Futian wanted to make a trip to the divine prefecture. He wanted to return to the village and bring the body of Shenjia the Great to this ruin. Chapter 2295, The Way Home. After Futian and Old Ma left, the other cultivators remained to hold off the attacks of the ancient corpses of the Great Path. These corpses, which could attack on their own accord, seemed to have minds of their own. Their combat ability was also astonishing. It was as though they were real cultivators who had experienced the divine tribulations of the Great Path. Renhuang Chen from Ziwei Imperial Palace and the top figures from various forces could not do anything to ward off these ancient corpses. After all, the corpses were already dead, and they were unaffected by the cultivators' attacks. On the other hand, the cultivators' lives were in danger as soon as they received a blow from these powerful corpses. Moreover, the rhythm coming from the grave intensified as time passed. This caused the ancient corpses to attack even more violently. In the end, all the cultivators were forced to retreat. After the cultivators got off the back of the dragon turtle, the ancient corpses ceased their pursuit. Then, the corpses returned to the grave, and the rhythm also dissipated. Everything on the dragon turtle's back gradually returned to normal. It was as though nothing had happened. The cultivators stood in the void space around the dragon turtle. The terrifying storms blasted out from the fissures. The cultivators were enveloped by the divine light of the Great Path so that they could resist the churning storms. At the same time, they traveled in space and followed the dragon turtle closely. The cultivators and the dragon turtle advanced at the same speed in the same direction. What should we do? Asked a cultivator from a top force in the dark world. The people around him looked at each other in search of answers. Some of them fixed their gazes on the ancient city on top of the dragon turtle's back. A light was still faintly twinkling amidst the dilapidated grave. A top figure analyzed the situation and said, "The power that controls the ancient corpses comes from within the grave. Moreover, the might is at the level of a great emperor. Since there is an emperor's might and it can direct the rhythm, we can more or less be certain that there is a will of the great emperor lingering in this ruin. The will of the great emperor has kept the dragon turtle moving in the void for all these years. It can also utilize the rhythm to activate the ancient corpses." The rest of the cultivators nodded in agreement when they heard his words. We have to assemble a bigger team of cultivators. All of them felt that the current situation was tricky. Many top forces from the divine prefecture, the dark world, and the empty divine realm were here. Yet, with their collective effort, they still couldn't seize control of this dragon turtle, which carried an ancient ruin on its back. Since they couldn't explore the ruin by themselves, they could only request stronger backup. Frightening rumbles thundered. The dragon turtle continued to advance in a specific direction. It traveled across space and left behind terrifying cracks. The storms churned continually. All the cultivators from various forces were eager to try their luck. Some of them made their second attempt to explore the ruin. However, they were encircled, attacked by the ancient corpses, and forced to retreat. Therefore, a bizarre scene took place in the void space. The dragon turtle, which was carrying a ruined city, or more precisely a grave, on its back, advanced in space. It caused a huge commotion as it moved. Many cultivators from various top forces, including quite a few giant-level figures, followed behind it. The scene was shocking. This scene continued for a period of time. The dragon turtle carrying the ruined city slowly approached the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It was about to enter the region where the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were. Fortunately, the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were widely dispersed. There was a large distance between each realm. The area of the void space in between realms was far larger than the cumulative area of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Therefore, this grievous dragon turtle might not necessarily collide with the realms. If, unfortunately, a collision between the dragon turtle and a realm really occurred, The realm would most likely be penetrated by the terrifying momentum of this beast. Lord Taixian and the rest could only pray in their hearts as they observed the movement of the dragon turtle. They were not capable enough to stop it from advancing. On the other side, Yi Futian and Old Ma managed to return to the divine prefecture with the help of the divine item given to Yi Futian by Princess Donghuang. However, they landed in the Donghua domain. They traversed space and moved towards the Shangqing domain. Their destination was Four Corner Village. Old Ma naturally understood why Yi Futian wanted to come back. After experiencing the terror of the ancient corpses on the dragon turtle's back, both of them understood that the cultivators from various forces would most likely be helpless. Under such circumstances, Yi Futian couldn't be involved in the fight. With his abilities, he was not even qualified to participate in the battle. Hence, he had to make a trip to the village and retrieve the sacred remains of Xinjia the Great Emperor. Only then did Yi Futian stand a chance to fight against the other parties for the treasures in the ruin. Old Ma was proficient in the power of space. Hence, their speed was fast. They rushed to the Shangqing domain from the Donghua domain. Then, they arrived at the Four Corner continent. The return of Yi Futian and Old Ma stirred up quite a commotion in Four Corner Village. Little Ling, Fang Kun, and the other two youngsters gathered around them. However, Yi Futian couldn't afford to waste much time here. He went straight to the private school in search of the master. In the private school, Master was meditating with his eyes closed. Yi Futian approached him and bowed slightly. He greeted, "Master. Are you here to retrieve the sacred remains?" Master asked Yi Futian as he opened his eyes. He seemed to know Yi Futian's intention for coming here. "Yes." Yi Futian nodded. "Did something occur in the original realm?" Master inquired. Since Yi Futian came from the original realm to retrieve the corpse of Xinjia the Great Emperor, it was obvious that something had happened there and that Yi Futian required the power of the sacred remains. Yi Futian described the situation to Master, saying, "In a void space of the original realm, a dragon turtle appears. It carries a ruined city on its back. There is a grave in the city which contains many ancient corpses of the Great Path. A rhythm is played from within the grave, and it can control the ancient corpses. It is menacing. The combat ability of the ancient corpses is also very shocking." A dragon turtle carrying a ruined city, and a grave at that, Master mumbled. "It is searching for its way home. Unfortunately, the way home is too far. It will most likely never be able to make it back. Does Master know what's going on?" Yi Futian revealed a strange expression. It was looking for its way home. The battle which led to the collapse of the heavenly path in the past was also known as the end of the gods. Countless top cultivators perished, and many gods fell. Even great Emperor Ziwei had to rely on sealing his will in the segment to preserve it. The longer Yi Futian came in contact with Master, the more he felt that Master was mysterious. Master was most likely a figure from the ancient past. Perhaps, he knew what happened in the past and the secrets of the dragon turtle and the grave. "I know," admitted Master while nodding his head. "Go and see for yourself." As Master said this, a body appeared beside Yi Futian. It was the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor. The divine light of the Great Path circled around the body, and it emanated an unfathomable aura. It was akin to a real deity. Yi Futian looked at it. Then, he moved towards it, and streaks of divine light flowed from Yi Futian into the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor. The two divine lights formed some resonance, and Yi Futian pocketed the corpse of Xinjia the Great Emperor. "Go. I will give you a ride so that you don't have to travel all the way back again," Master instructed. After that, a gentle force enveloped Yi Futian and Old Ma. They were hurled outwards. It seemed like Master wanted to send them back to the original realm. Chapter 2296, Stop. In the original realm where the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were, there was a terrifying disturbance in the sky above the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm. In the heavens above, menacing dark fissures seemed to appear. The cultivators of the heavenly mandate realm immediately glanced over towards the direction of the commotion. They saw an extremely astonishing sight. A gigantic dragon turtle bearing an ancient ruined city was traversing across the sky. As it did so, it was descending, seemingly approaching the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm. The terrifying dark fishes seemed to consume everything. What was that? Countless cultivators of the heavenly mandate realm witnessed this awe-inspiring scene. They were greatly affected as this scene was too shocking. Not only were they looking at the gigantic dragon turtle, but they were also glancing at the cultivators around it. Each of these cultivators was a top figure. They were actually following the dragon turtle, which was carrying an ancient ruined city on its back as it advanced. What did they want? Lord Taishen is also among them, someone exclaimed. Many people spotted Lord Taishen and the others. The top cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy were also there. It was not just them, the cultivators from various top forces were all there. Retreat, someone cried out. The dragon turtle was advancing at a frightening speed, descending towards them. No one knew where it would land. It was likely that it would crash on the outskirts of the heavenly mandate realm. Many cultivators were already beginning to retreat. In the sky, Lord Taishen looked towards the direction where the dragon turtle was moving. He could not help but frown when he traced its trajectory. It was highly likely that it would collide with the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm. However, they had no means of preventing it from doing so. Although more and more cultivators were rushing over to where they were still severely outnumbered. They could not block the dragon turtle's path. They had attempted to do so many times along the way. It's getting close, someone shouted. The cultivators of the heavenly mandate realm dispersed. The dragon turtle descended in an imposing manner. It appeared like an evil demon that wanted to consume everything. With an ancient city on its back, it descended upon the lands on the outskirts of the heavenly mandate realm and crashed right into it. Rumble. The dragon turtle crashed into the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm. Terrifying fissures appeared on the ground, followed by earth and debris scattering everywhere. The frightening jet-black fissures consumed everything. It was as though the heavens and earth were collapsing. At that moment, the entire heavenly mandate realm felt a tremor. The closer they were to this place, the more intense the tremor felt. There were even frightening cracks that propagated far into the distance. It seemed as though the land was being ripped apart. It was a catastrophe. Down below, the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy unleashed the divine light of the Great Path, sweeping away a group who had not managed to get away, thereby protecting them. The dragon turtle's advance was not hindered too greatly. It continued downwards, penetrating the Heavenly Mandate realm. The lands along the boundary were immediately reduced to rubble and later consumed by the jet-black fissures. After the dragon turtle left, Lord Taishen and the others left the people they had saved at a safe location before continuing to pursue it. The cultivators bowed slightly at Lord Taishen and the others. Emotions welled up in them for having survived a disaster. The scene just now was too terrifying. They lowered their heads and peered down below. Their hearts still trembled intensely beyond their control. What exactly was that thing? There seemed to be a grave on the back of the dragon turtle. After piercing through the heavenly mandate realm, the dragon turtle had completely entered the region of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It was still advancing further. This dragon turtle, which had wandered in the vast void for countless years, had finally arrived in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, where there were cultivators. "We must stop it," said Lord Taishen. It was too dangerous to allow this to continue. No one knew which continent the dragon turtle would crash into. Once it did, the continent would be reduced to rubble. The dragon turtle was still moving forward. More cultivators rushed over to where they were. Many powerful existences had survived divine tribulations of the Great Path. They were also chasing after the dragon turtle. Above the heavenly mandate realm, two silhouettes suddenly appeared. They were Futian and Old Ma. The two of them glanced down and saw the shattered lands of the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm as well as the terrifying fissures of the Great Path. "Let's go." The two of them stepped forward and pursued the terrifying aura. Futian frowned. As expected, the thing he was worried about had occurred. The dragon turtle had actually descended upon the lands of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It had even shattered the boundary of the heavenly mandate realm and was moving further into the region. Divine light of space shone. Old Ma's speed was extremely fast as he traversed the space and chased after the aura. As they made their way over, Futian and Old Ma saw a broken continent. Countless rubble was floating in the space. More than half of the entire continent was consumed by dark fissures. When Futian saw this scene, and his heart was extremely heavy. The worst possible outcome had occurred. The dragon turtle had collided with a continent and shattered it. Finally, they sensed the terrifying aura ahead and knew that they were close. The two of them continued forward and finally saw the dragon turtle. Right then, in the space surrounding where the dragon turtle was traversing, many top cultivators appeared. Most of them were existences who had survived divine tribulations of the Great Path. The cultivators from the divine prefecture, the dark world, and the empty divine realm were all present. They seemed to have reached an agreement and were preparing to join forces to stop the dragon turtle from advancing. It was not because the other forces pitted the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, but rather that allowing the dragon turtle to continue moving would make it more difficult to claim the ruined city on its back. It was best if they could trap it here and stop it in its tracks. In front of the dragon turtle, a heavenly bulwark seemed to appear. Tens of thousands of runes lit up. It was extremely dazzling. The dragon turtle crashed right into the bulwark. Cracks appeared on its surface. However, the next moment, a gate of world suppression appeared there. It was like an ancient door of the gods that could suppress everything in this world. Wangshan Watchtower also blocked the dragon turtle's path. Millet Emperor had appeared. Rumble. Terrifying rumbling sounds caused the space to tremble violently. Even the gate of world suppression was penetrated, and Wangshan Watchtower was knocked backward. However, the advance of the dragon turtle was beginning to weaken. After that, other cultivators appeared one by one. Various incredibly powerful figures had arrived. Emperor Shi and Renhuang Chen also attacked. This time, the cultivators of the three major realms were actually exceptionally united in their efforts to stop the dragon turtle. The dragon turtle began to slow down. It seemed sluggish. It let out a sorrowful cry. Followed by rumbling sounds, the dragon turtle finally came to a stop. In the void, it seemed as though an ancient ruined city had appeared out of thin air. From within the grave, the rhythm could be heard again. It contained an intense sorrow within it. The grave moved once again. The ancient corpses on it also floated up with it. It seemed as though the actions of the crowd had incurred the wrath of the grave. It appeared that there was indeed life within it. Futian stared straight ahead. He faintly sensed that this dragon turtle had not stopped because the others had blocked its path, but rather the power that drove it had caused it to stop. Otherwise, it would most likely still have been difficult for the various top cultivators to prevent the dragon turtle from advancing. Master said that the dragon turtle was seeking its way home. Could it be that the owner of the grave was making his way home? Chapter 2297. The Great Emperor is alive. After the dragon turtle came to a stop, at last, no more new dark fissures appeared. Everything gradually returned to being peaceful. However, in the void space, there was a ruined city floating about. In the void space around it, the cultivators stood staring at the ruined city. Ancient corpses emerged from the grave one by one as the rhythm played. It seemed to be controlling the movement of the ancient corpses. A few of the powerful ancient corpses were still around, standing in different locations. They stared wide-eyed at the surrounding cultivators. It was as though they themselves were cultivators who were still alive. These ancient corpses released extremely powerful auras. As the rhythm spread outwards, the ancient corpses began to move. They immediately pounced towards the surrounding cultivators. The power of each ancient corpse was comparable to that of a giant-level figure. "We must destroy them right away," someone said. These ancient corpses were originally lifeless. They could only be stopped by destroying them completely. The various cultivators nodded their heads in agreement. This time, the cultivators from three major realms were gathered around here. All of them unleashed auras of the Great Path at the same time. For a moment, the power of the Great Path around them rampaged and was extremely frightening. As Yi Futian, who was standing in the distance and did not attack, watched the situation over here, even he could sense the suffocating pressure sweeping outwards. There was a gigantic tower that came crashing down while unleashing destructive golden divine halos, flattening and shattering everything. Sword rivers annihilated everything within the space. Long dark spears traversed across the darkness. Divine halos of space tore the space apart. In an instant, the attacks of the various cultivators that burst forth simultaneously blocked out the sky. The entire ruined city was blanketed within these attacks. None of the ancient corpses could escape the range of these attacks. The rampaging power of these attacks came crashing down like an apocalypse might. Huge rumbling noises could be heard. In an instant, the ancient corpses that were charging towards the cultivators were mostly destroyed. They were buried within the ruined city. They could not charge out even if they wanted to. Jet black fissures appeared in the chaotic space, not settling for a long while. Once everything returned to normal, many ancient corpses had already disappeared, having been completely annihilated. Only a few powerful ancient corpses remained standing there. The chaotic, destructive power did not manage to destroy them. These ancient corpses were powerful existences that could stand against figures at the level of Renhuang Chen. In the grave, a light grew brighter and brighter. The rhythm also grew louder and louder. A loud bang could be heard as the grave burst open. A corpse stood on top of the grave. From within it, the formless rhythm surged non-stop into the corpse. It caused the corpse to be circled by halos of the Great Path. As the corpse stood there, a formless pressure swept out. It caused the various cultivators to stand around the ruined city to sense a terrifying pressure acting on them. Their gazes gradually became serious. The rhythm contained a unique power. It surged into the corpse that had appeared and caused the aura of the corpse to grow more and more powerful. Divine light actually circled around it, and the lifeless corpse seemed to be reborn into a body that was truly alive. Its hair was black as ink, and its skin became smoother. Its features became more defined, as though it had truly been resurrected. It was not just its features. From its body, halos of rhythm were released that circled around it and enveloped the other ancient corpses. The other corpses immediately lit up with beams of light. When the surrounding cultivators saw this scene, their expressions turned serious. Was this the Corpse King? It seemed that with him as the center, the surrounding corpses all came back to life. Where was this rhythm coming from? Why did it contain such power? It is a long-lost divine melody. I think I know who is buried within this grave, claimed someone. The gazes of the crowd immediately shifted towards the speaker. It was Lord Luo from Outer Violet Heaven, a master of a divine melody. This rhythm was a long-lost divine melody. The hearts of the various cultivators stirred. Divine melodies were created by great emperors. Only the melodies created by deity-like existences such as great emperors were qualified to be called divine melodies. The 9 great divine melodies were all passed down from ancient times. That meant to say that, as expected, the master in the grave of the ruined city on the dragon turtle's back was an ancient great emperor. Many people revealed contemplative looks. Some people seemed to have realized this. Their expressions changed instantly. Many people did not know about the mystery behind the divine melody. They could not help but ask, which divine melody is it? Who is buried within the grave? It is the divine requiem, said Lord Luo. It is the most sorrowful divine melody among the 9 great divine melodies. It was composed by a prominent figure in ancient times, Xinyin the Great. Once the divine requiem is played, the world will be cast into sorrow. It can control the emotions of others, and they will not be able to break free of its grasp. No wonder the cry of the dragon turtle was so sorrowful before this. Xinyin the Great. The hearts of the various cultivators trembled. This great emperor was also a figure who made it into the annals of history. In the legends, Xinyin the Great was a person who was true to himself. He was obsessed with the way of rhythm his whole life and cultivated it to its utmost limit. During his time, he was the top master of the way of rhythm. Otherwise, How could his divine requiem claim to cast the world into sorrow when played? How can it control these ancient corpses then? Someone asked. These ancient corpses seemed to be controlled by the rhythm. Lord Luo explained, it is because this is not the true divine requiem. Shenyin the Great was the top master of rhythm of his era. He was terrifyingly proficient in musical techniques. It is not unthinkable that he can control ancient corpses. I am more curious as to whether the grave contains more than just the will of Shenyin the Great. His expression was stern. The surrounding cultivators also revealed strange expressions. They clearly understood what he meant by this. If only his will were present in the grave, how was it that it could activate the rhythm and control these corpses? It also seemed to be doing so as it pleased. However, if it was not just the will of the great emperor in the grave, what else was buried there? It was an astonishing line of thought. Lord Luo bowed towards the grave and said, "Great Emperor, we stumbled upon this place in the void, so we wanted to explore it. We had no intention of disturbing you." When the surrounding cultivators heard Lord Luo's words, they were shocked. Lord Luo believed that the great emperor was still alive. How was this possible? If a great emperor from eons ago was still alive, why hadn't he appeared in the world sooner? Why did the dragon turtle need to wander in the void? If the great emperor was still alive, he could have killed them all with a flick of his hand. Why did he need to act in such a roundabout fashion? Lord Luo, I believe you are overthinking things, someone said. The other cultivators clearly did not believe this legendary figure from the ancient era had survived until the present day. If that were the case, it would be too astonishing. Lord Luo continued, "Everyone, you seem to have forgotten the mysterious master of Four Corner Village. Nothing is impossible. After the collapse of the heavenly path, it was claimed that the gods had perished. However, can gods truly perish so easily? It might be that they exist in a different form in the world now." His words caused many people to frown. They seemed to have recalled something. Everyone ignored Lord Luo's words. There was movement in the grave aside from the rhythm playing. It surged into the various ancient corpses, especially the Corpse King. The Corpse King seemed to have come alive. A terrifying storm of rhythm emanated from his body and spread outward quickly. In an instant, the storm of rhythm enveloped the entire space. Everyone was within the domain of this rhythm. The rhythm was formless, yet its effect could be felt by all the cultivators present. The cultivators examined their surroundings. They could sense the omnipresent rhythm. Their eardrums vibrated with the rhythm, they formed some resonance with the music. It was as though their spiritual souls were invaded by it. Extreme grief welled up inside of them. They could feel despair and sorrow from deep within their souls. Beware. Many people reminded each other to be careful. The intense emotion mixed in the rhythm could directly affect the cultivators' souls, causing them to feel miserable. Sorrow, despair, helplessness, and the futility of struggling propagated along with the rhythm. These intense emotions directly impacted the cultivators, causing their mindfulness of the path to be swayed. It also lowered their combat abilities. Countless images that were related to their traumas surged in their minds. The traumas that each cultivator recalled were all memories that impacted their hearts and their souls the most. The negativity that they felt was magnified continuously, causing them to dwell in misery. It's the divine requiem. Lord Luo's emotions were similarly affected. At the same time, he was shocked by the might of the rhythm. This was the terror of the divine requiem. It would not attack the cultivators directly, yet it could perturb their mindfulness of the path and cause them to break down. Indirectly, it could destroy the cultivators. Humanity would dwell in sorrow as soon as the divine requiem was played. One could imagine how frightening this divine melody was. All the cultivators present had their own stories to tell. They had experienced countless tribulations to reach the peak of the Renhuang Plain. They had fortified their mindfulness of the path, and they were good at suppressing their emotions. Some of them even deserted all their feelings to achieve greater attainment in their way. Nevertheless, their experiences remained as memories in their minds. The divine requiem had the magical power to evoke those memories hidden in their minds. It would then amplify the negativity felt by the cultivators, causing them to wallow endlessly in sadness. It would destroy the will of a person. Even top figures would be affected by this. As to how powerful the effect would be, it depended on who was playing the divine requiem. It was the same for Yi Futian. He thought that his mindfulness of the path and his conviction were firm. However, right now, his memories that had long been hidden were once again evoked. The scenes resurfaced in his mind and leaped into his consciousness. It was as though he had returned to the days of his youth. He saw his teacher and grandmaster. He even experienced the sorrow and despair he had felt back then once again. It was as though he had returned to the time when he was back at Sage Hall and experienced the death of Jiyu all over. The intense sorrow seemed to be magnified, causing grief from deep within his soul to emerge. It felt as though he had lost his ability to fight completely. This sensation was too frightening. He never imagined that the rhythm actually possessed such astonishing power. It could subdue its opponents without a fight, destroying its enemies through their emotions. "This won't do," a voice cried out from within Yi Futian. He had to break free, otherwise, he would be in grave danger. Setting aside the fact that the ancient corpses had not attacked, even if they didn't, his mind would gradually be worn out if he continued to be immersed in this endless sorrow until he was eventually crippled. Was the divine melody played by a true top figure actually this powerful? Who was playing it now? At that moment, he actually came to the same preposterous conclusion as Lord Luo. Could it be that the great emperor was actually still alive? Who else could play such a divine melody? Rumble. At that moment, the great path resonated on Yi Futian's figure. His body became a divine body of the great path. The endless divine light of the great path circled around him. Musical notes burst forth from inside his body. These dancing musical notes intertwined to form a melody and countered the attack of the divine requiem. However, right then, the ancient corpses began to move. This time, they no longer attacked frantically like before. Instead, they were following the movements of the corpse king. The figure of the corpse king floated up into the air. He stood at the center of the storm of rhythm. He was circled by the endless storm. The other ancient corpses seemed to follow him and appeared around his figure. The corpse king appeared like a truly extraordinary cultivator. He raised a finger, and immediately, the storm of rhythm in the vast space moved with his finger. Countless sword wills instantly appeared in the sky. These sword wills merged with the storm of rhythm. The humming of swords seemed to become a sorrowful wail. The hum of swords and the melody reverberated throughout the space. The other ancient corpses also did the same. The vast space was immediately enveloped by the sorrowful wail of swords. It was difficult for those caught in it to break free from its grasp. Buzz. The corpse king lifted his finger and pointed at the cultivators. Immediately, myriads of humming swords appeared in the vast space. Each and every one of the swords was tainted with inexhaustible sadness. All the swords slashed towards the cultivators at the same time. The swords seemed to be capable of destroying one's spiritual soul. They were akin to the swords of great sorrow. A formless power was hidden within the swords as they charged towards the cultivators. All the top figures in the region were targeted by the swords. "Be careful," warned Renhuang Chen as his figure appeared beside Yi Futian. Starlight illuminated and enveloped their surroundings. Yi Futian and the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were shielded under the starlight screen. Rumble. Endless sword will descended and blasted on the starlight screen. The entire screen was covered with invading sword will. Yi Futian and his group could clearly see how the sword will landed on the screen and caused it to shake violently. Cracks appeared on the screen. The terrifying melody permeated through the screen and affected the will of everyone. In other directions, cultivators from various top forces were also fighting hard to defend against the sword will. Even the giant-level figures felt threatened by the ferocious attack. Some people retreated frantically while some people sought protection from tribulation-level cultivators. Right at this moment, the ancient corpses dispersed. They moved simultaneously as they charged towards the cultivators in various directions. The corpse king remained where he was. His gaze was devoid of emotion. He was a dead man, after all. Naturally, he wouldn't have any feelings. The Corpse King glanced in one direction. His gaze landed on a giant-level figure from the Divine Prefecture. Then, he raised his arm and sent out a palm strike from across the space. A gigantic palm immediately appeared in the heavens and earth. Even the gigantic palm was ringing with a sorrowful wail. This palm of great sorrow flew towards the cultivator. The cultivator retreated frenziedly. The sorrowful wail seemed to be omnipresent. It seeped into his mind and disturbed his emotions, causing him not to be able to focus and retaliate with his full force. At this moment, the palm of great sorrow slammed into him. With a loud bang, his spiritual soul was shattered. His body plummeted from the sky. He was killed instantly with a palm strike. Chapter 2299. The Great Emperor? Stand back, a voice called out. Various top cultivators backed down. Renhuang Chen, who was protecting the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, also said, "Stand back for now. This Corpse King is terrifying." A giant-level figure had been killed with one blow so easily. The Corpse King's combat ability was astonishing. Cultivators who had not survived a divine tribulation would find it difficult to take a stand against the Corpse King. Even tribulation-level cultivators were having a hard time fighting him. "It is already too late," said Emperor Shi. A sorrowful wail could be heard all around them. They were all trapped in this domain of rhythm. The storm of rhythm that surrounded the vast space merged with the hum of swords and became a mournful wail of swords. It blocked out the sky and enveloped all the cultivators. In the ruined city, rhythm still floated out non-stop from within the grave towards the figure of the Corpse King. There were certainly secrets hidden within the grave. It was also highly likely that it was the secret to the divine requiem. Could it truly be as Lord Luo had speculated and that the great emperor existed in a different form in the world now? If not, how could such a powerful rhythm be created? Seal off your senses. Do not let the rhythm affect you, someone reminded loudly. The grievous wails persisted. It directly affected the spiritual souls of the cultivators. The thick sense of sorrow pierced straight through to the hearts of the cultivators. If this continued, they would succumb to endless despair under the rhythm and would not be able to break free from its grasp. Many giant-level figures were already severely affected and had lost their will to fight. "Elder, may I trouble you to guard my body?" Yi Futian asked. As he said this, his spiritual soul left his body and entered into the sacred remains of Shenjia the Great Emperor. With his current plane in this domain, Yi Futian could not withstand a single blow to his body. Right then, a suffocating pressure appeared in the heavens and the earth. The sorrowful, wailing sword will in the sky trembled. There was a loud rumble. Someone immediately shattered the domain and entered the area. Many people raised their heads and looked at the person who had arrived. Their hearts were trembling. Before this, cultivators from the various top forces had already informed their clans or forces to send over super cultivators who had survived the second divine tribulation. It seemed that someone had arrived. The Corpse King raised his head and swept a glance at the other party. He then raised a finger, and immediately Cold Sword will howled as it charged towards the other party. A frightening pattern of the great path appeared before the person who had arrived, blocking out the sky. When the sorrowful sword will stabbed forward, it actually sank straight into the pattern. Another extremely powerful aura descended and appeared above. Clearly, the second super cultivator had arrived. How could the relic of a great emperor appearing in the void realm not cause a commotion? Even the top super cultivators could not resist coming over to take a look to see whether there was a great emperor-level existence here. After a short while, in the surrounding void, many super cultivators appeared. These people were definitely rare sights to behold. They stood at the very top, high above everyone else. After the great emperor, they were the strongest existences. They were the backbone of their forces and controlled superpowers. An example was Taichu Saint Emperor. He was already a cultivator at the top of the pyramid and was the ruler of the Taichu domain. For cultivators of this level, their greatest obsession was the Great Emperor plane. However, it was almost impossible for them to reach this plane. Ever since the collapse of the heavenly path, How many great emperors had there been? No matter how talented these cultivators were, the great emperor plane was always beyond their reach. After they arrived, they stared at these ancient corpses. Had these corpses been given life? Where was the rhythm coming from? As they pondered on this, they immediately stepped forward toward the grave. They wanted to see what secrets were hidden within. Were the remains of Shenyin the Great buried within this ruined city on the back of a dragon turtle? The ancient corpses around the grave charged towards the cultivators who were approaching them. Sword will howled sorrowfully and rained down. However, the people who had arrived this time were powerful existences. A cultivator from the dark world lifted a finger and the ancient corpse charging towards him became a pile of shriveled bones. It disappeared gradually and turned to ash. Another cultivator slashed out with his own sword will. The space was instantly shattered, and everything in its path was annihilated. Even the space before him was shredded into pieces, let alone the corpses. They were immediately reduced to nothing. Another cultivator merely waved his hand, and the ancient corpses were disintegrated. This was the absolute suppression of planes. Once one reached this plane, the difference between each plane was insurmountable. Cultivators who survived the second divine tribulation could not be compared with those who only survived the first. The latter could be suppressed with a mere wave of a hand by the former. In an instant, most of the ancient corpses were destroyed. Only the corpse king was left standing there. He was staring at the cultivators who were approaching him with his deep gaze. The corpse king might have also been an existence who survived the second divine tribulation. Alas, he was but a corpse now. He couldn't wield the same level of combat ability as he did when he was still alive. He had been weakened greatly. It was most likely impossible for him to deal with these super cultivators by just activating the rhythm. Sorry for the offense, one of the cultivators apologized. He then lifted his hand and pointed a finger forwards. The space in front of him instantly collapsed and shattered. A frightening black hole appeared. This space could not withstand an attack of a cultivator of this level. A simple attack would cause the great path to collapse. The other cultivators also attacked at the same time, aiming their attacks at the corpse king. Astonishing powers swept towards the figure of the corpse king simultaneously. The crowd could predict what the outcome would be. The corpse king would certainly be decimated by these attacks. At this moment, a menacing divine light surged from within the grave. The light transformed into the storm of rhythm which enveloped the corpse king. Many attacks landed at the same time, flooding the entire space where the corpse king was. However, after the destructive storm dissipated, the cultivators noticed that the corpse king was still standing tall, unharmed by the attacks. An even more frightening aura permeated from his body. The light from within the grave surged into his body frenziedly. The surrounding cultivators frowned. The corpse king was not eradicated even when faced with such attacks from the crowd. Furthermore, they could vaguely sense that the aura of the corpse king was undergoing metamorphosis. It was becoming stronger. An unparalleled might emanated from the corpse king, causing the cultivators to feel an overbearing pressure. It was the might of a great emperor. As expected, it was the aura of a great emperor. Could it be that the will of the great emperor was really hidden in the grave? Moreover, the user could control this might so freely. The thing hidden in the grave would most likely not just be the will of the great emperor. The hearts of all the cultivators quivered. Even those who had experienced the second divine tribulation found it hard to remain calm at this moment. Could it be that Shenyin the Great was really still alive? More and more cultivators found themselves believing the words of Lord Luo. Perhaps he was right. The great emperor might still be alive in another form. He might have even retained his consciousness. If that was the case, then the thing hidden in the grave was. A horrific rhythmic atmosphere diffused from the corpse king and swept across the space without reserve. In an instant, heaven and earth were once again surrounded by rhythms and formed a domain dominated by it. Traces of musical rhythm burrowed into everyone's ears, probing into their spiritual souls. Even those powerful beings who had passed the second divine tribulation felt a shudder in their spiritual souls. Buzz. The fluctuations of the rhythm continued to spread from the corpse king. It was as if his body was merely a conductor. In a brief moment, the vast land was enveloped by the will contained in the rhythm. The music of a song began to play, and every single beating note seemed to contain endless sorrow. The divine requiem. Lord Luo's expression was solemn. He had a look of piety. He then sat cross-legged directly in this void, listening very carefully. Although this divine requiem was terrifying, it was also a great blessing to personally experience the long-lost divine requiem. Furthermore, it was possible that this divine requiem was being performed by Shenyin the Great himself. Even if he was not in human form, he existed in another form, playing this stunning divine tune. As a rhythmic cultivator, Lord Luo appreciated the opportunity to hear the divine requiem here, even if it meant that he must withstand terrible rhythmic attacks. He did not deliberately resist the attacks but allowed things to take their course, wanting to comprehend the fullness of the divine requiem. And because of his own cultivation in rhythm, he had stronger resistance than most. Of course, even if Lord Luo deliberately resisted it, it wouldn't do him much good. The divine requiem had shrouded the vast space and rang throughout this corner of the sky. It had wormed into everyone's ears and infiltrated their spiritual souls so that there was absolutely nowhere to hide. Those major figureheads who had retreated sat cross-legged, trying to shut down all their senses, but it was totally futile. Once the divine requiem started to play, that endless sadness quickly took hold of their minds, dragging them into a world created by the mood of dejection. So much so that they had forgotten where they were and were compelled to enter an atmosphere of extreme sorrow of their own making. As soon as the divine requiem sounded, the whole world grieved. As despondency percolated into this world, Futian sat cross-legged like most people. Although his spiritual soul was in the body of Shunjia the Great Emperor, it was still impossible for him to resist the invasion of the divine music. This rhythm was particularly good at invading the spiritual souls, and the strong sense of sadness took hold of him once again. It was a feeling of desperation, endless emptiness, and endless sorrow. This emotion was then amplified to the point that it could make anyone who heard it lose their mind. As if mired in quicksand, they immersed themselves in that extreme sadness, unable to extricate themselves until their will was completely eaten away. Even those strong cultivators who had survived the twofold divine tribulation were strongly affected. They looked at the corpse king in front of them while their own bodies were releasing a terrifying aura of the great path. They continued moving forward, intent on destroying the other. If they didn't, they would also be affected by the rhythm to the point of falling within that inescapable mood. However, as they moved forward, the rhythmic storm became even more frightening, engulfing their bodies and madly infiltrating their minds. A strong sense of grief was born involuntarily. It was as if they could no longer control their own will but were controlled by that music. But the existence at this level had wills like iron that were hard to bend. Even in this state, they struggled to stretch out their hands, pointing at the body of the corpse king. A single arm was able to penetrate the rhythmic storm. It continued penetrating the storm little by little until that arm was in front of the corpse king, pointing directly at his physical body. In other directions, those who had survived the twofold divine tribulations also tried to touch the corpse king by any means possible. At this moment, the space had been completely torn apart and shattered, and there was no power to stop the madness of the storm or the collapse of that space. The extremely brilliant light and the light of darkness appeared at the same time. Then they saw the body of the corpse king began to disperse a little bit at a time, until it completely disappeared, destroyed. Is he dead? Everyone wondered after what they had seen. That's not quite right. Their expressions became alert, though their sadness remained. The rhythm had not dissipated, and it was just a corpse. Even if its physical form was destroyed, it didn't necessarily mean anything. Previously, the rhythm had been using his body as a medium to play the music. That top cultivator, who had reached the front, lowered his head to check out the tomb below. He saw wisps of rhythmic fluctuations that had begun to drift outward. As the man stepped out, a heavy pressure suddenly dropped down, causing cracks upon the tomb. It started to break apart in the middle. He wanted to see what was hidden inside the tomb. Even though everything that happened before was extremely uncanny, as if the great emperor had truly existed, he didn't believe that Shenyin the Great was still alive. If so, how could he have allowed them to do what they had done here? Inside this tomb, there might be secrets that were yet unknown to them. Once the tomb was broken open, an ancient sarcophagus appeared inside. It was a pure white sarcophagus. The terrifying rhythm was coming from it, and even divine consciousness could not penetrate and scan it. This was enough to sober up several cultivators who had survived the twofold divine tribulation. They stared at this white sarcophagus. Was the body of Shenyin the Great inside? If it was indeed the corpse of the great emperor, then where did this rhythm come from? And why was it able to be played here? Moreover, the music from the sarcophagus did not stop but became stronger instead, so that these top cultivators felt as if they were inside an illusion, that they, too, were about to fall into that deepest sorrow. Boom! The aura from them was shocking. They fixed their attention on the sarcophagus. In any case, they were determined to break it open and expose the secrets inside the sarcophagus. If the corpse of the great emperor was really inside, it might be the beginning of another bloody conflict. Like before, they moved toward the sarcophagus, but the bursts of energy from the great path dissipated immediately when they got near the sarcophagus. Just like before, they tried to launch their attacks at close range. Someone stretched out a hand and pointed at the sarcophagus. His body penetrated and entered the rhythmic storm. Someone else unleashed an amazing sword that pierced through the storm, all the way down. The attacks of these powerful cultivators in the original realm were enough to shatter heaven and earth and destroy the great path. However, they were under incomparable pressure. It was as if their attacks were blocked as they struggled to move forward. However, they were getting closer. Lord Luo opened his eyes and looked ahead. His heart was beating violently. It seemed that the sarcophagus was really about to be opened. He had speculated that the great emperor might have existed in another form and that the behaviors of these cultivators were terribly disrespectful to the great emperor. If the great emperor truly existed in another form, no one would know what the consequences would be. However, these men were determined, and their minds were made up. It was impossible to stop them. Finally, someone's attack took hold and landed on the white sarcophagus. A cracking sound was heard. The sarcophagus began to crack. It didn't seem so difficult to break now. Bang! The ancient white sarcophagus exploded. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the contents inside. Chapter 2301, Divine Guqin. All eyes were glued to the scene ahead. Even in the midst of the emotional struggle, they opened their eyes and stared. They wondered what was inside the tomb in the ruin that had been pulled by the dragon turtle. No one doubted that the will of the great emperor was here and that it was Shenyin the Great, the first man of music in ancient times. Then, was the corpse of Shenyin the Great inside this white sarcophagus? Everyone stared at the broken sarcophagus and finally saw what was hidden inside. There was no corpse, no physical body of Shenyin the Great, and no one else either. In the sarcophagus, the rhythmic storm continued raging, and the rhythm was originated from the strings of a guqin. Inside this white sarcophagus, there was only a guqin, one that seemed to be alive, capable of playing divine music by itself. The hearts of all the cultivators were beating quickly. A guqin that could play the divine music? What kind of guqin was this? And who was controlling the guqin? Furthermore, they could feel the will of the great emperor contained within the sounds of the music. Did this mean that this guqin contained the will of Shenyin the Great? However, even if this guqin contained the will of Shenyin the Great, why was it playing freely, as if it was alive? It even had the power to control those ancient corpses with the music. Could it be? As their thought turned to this, even those who had survived the second divine tribulation felt a great disturbance in their hearts. They stared at the guqin below and realized that there was only one possibility that could have led to such a situation. After Shenyin the Great had perished, he might have incorporated his consciousness into this guqin, thus infusing the guqin with life force. Perhaps Lord Luo was right. The great emperor may have existed in another form, such as inside of this guqin, so that he was able to use this guqin to play the divine music. Just as they were considering this possibility, they saw that a few top cultivators had already made their move as they started grabbing at the instrument. This was a true divine item, one that might possess the will of a great emperor. If it could be controlled, what would that be like? However, as soon as they grabbed for the guqin, an extremely radiant divine brilliance erupted from it. It contained supreme coercion, radiating and falling directly on several powerful cultivators. Suddenly, these men were repelled backward, and no one was able to remain standing under that divine brilliance. Even the others who were in the distance felt the pressure of the great emperor that permeated in the sound of the guqin. Their hearts beat wildly as they saw the guqin flying up and floating in the air. The strings on the guqin kept moving, and the might of the emperor diffused from the guqin itself and covered the boundless space. At this moment, those top-notch cultivators actually had the urge to worship the guqin. It was as if that guqin represented the great emperor himself. The sound from the guqin increased its coercion, it was more penetrating than before, piercing into their spiritual souls. Finally, the dragon turtle let out a violent bellow. It seemed as if even the corpse of the dragon turtle was deeply affected by it. All the cultivators were immersed in despair and sorrow. They couldn't imagine how a person could perform such a sorrowful composition. What did Shenyin the Great experience to cause him to compose the divine requiem? Futian felt the music a bit more deeply than the others. He was a student of the guqin and understood that the music represented a person's state of mind. The person who could compose something like the divine requiem must have gone through endless sadness and despair himself. For a great existence, such as Shenyin the Great, who stood at the pinnacle of music, to have personally experienced such extreme grief was something unimaginable. The extreme sadness affected everyone's emotions, and the sadness only deepened. It was as if even the souls were crying out as well. The body of Shenjia the Great Emperor raised his head and looked at that beating guqin. Tears seemed to have stained the corners of his eyes. If one is immersed in this mood, what would it be like? Futian wondered. He was surrounded by the imperial will and was closely guarding his thoughts. But at the same time, he let loose of his emotions and no longer resisted. He allowed the sound of guqin to invade his emotions. Since it was impossible to resist, why not accept it and feel the true feelings the music was trying to convey? As the sound of guqin continued to spread, heaven and earth fell into endless sorrow, even the great path seemed to be in grief. Similarly, the resistance of those major figures gradually weakened as more and more people quieted down. The aura of the great path upon their bodies gradually dissipated. Like Futian, they were slowly immersed in the sound of the guqin, unable to extricate themselves from its hold. One by one, they sank into the mood created by the guqin in endless sorrow. Only those who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path were still resisting, especially those who had survived the second divine tribulation. Their will was the most persistent, but even then, they were being affected profoundly. Their will was unrelenting, and they refused to surrender to the sound of the guqin. In their present state of cultivation, they were only one step away from the heavenly path. How could they be affected by the rhythmic path of the music? To them, this concept was unacceptable. Some continued to try to grab at the guqin. Several others also did whatever they could to try to obtain the guqin by force, using the supreme power of the great path to prevent the music from continuing. But those moving strings seemed to never stop, and round after round of sound waves swept out, making every movement extremely difficult to manage. When they got close to the guqin, radiant divine glory would bloom from it, like the might of the great emperor. It spread out with the sound of the guqin to suppress these cultivators. Every cultivator was incredibly tense as the strings continued to move, and another terrible imperial might descended upon them. Once again, those cultivators were knocked back again, and some couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. Although it was just a guqin, it seemed to be alive, and there was no way to capture it. Those top figures looked at the guqin that floated in the void, and their hearts trembled. It seemed that Shenyin the Great might exist in this guqin in another form, giving it life. But, even if strong cultivators like them coveted the item, they were unable to achieve it. Unless it was the guqin itself that allowed them access without resistance, it could not be done. A storm of rhythm shrouded this vast space, and everyone seemed to quiet down. The aura of the great path they released gradually dissipated. One may see that there were traces of tears in many top cultivators' eyes. The whole world seemed to be immersed in despair and sorrow, even the air was filled with sadness. The dragon turtle's sad bellowing was heard at this moment. As it cried, the dragon turtle moved again. Accompanied by the violent sounds, the dragon turtle set off again to smash through those previous defenses. It gradually accelerated along with the sound of the guqin. It was as if it were still looking for a way home as it had done before. This time, the bellowing continued and persisted, resounding in this endless space in the void. It seemed that the whole world was filled with endless sorrow. The dragon turtle set off. Rumbling sounds rolled across the void. Spatial cracks appeared between heaven and earth, and the sound of sad bellowing that came from the dragon turtle seemed to draw tears from the others as well. Even sadder was the divine requiem. Upon the immense body of the dragon turtle, that city of ruin formed a field dominated by the music of the great path. All the cultivators were trapped within it, including those who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path. They, too, were mired in the sorrowful mood of the divine requiem, falling into sadness so absolute that they were unable to escape by themselves. Those who had survived the second major divine tribulation had the strongest resistance, but they could not take hold of the guqin. Gradually, the sound of the guqin invaded their minds, sending them into the mood of absolute sadness. This absolute sadness overwhelmed even the strongest of wills and crushed them. Unless a cultivator could strip away his own emotions and desires, he would not be able to break free from this music played by the great emperor. No matter how strong anyone's cultivation was, they had fallen into that feeling. Gradually, apart from the sad bellows of the dragon turtle, the space became extremely quiet except for that desolate, sorrowful sound from the guqin. Futian had already fallen into this sadness and knew that he could not and did not resist the sound of the guqin. Instead, he had allowed himself to go with the flow and immersed himself in it. He wanted to see if this sadness could destroy him, but he also wanted to see what was hidden in this extreme sorrow. Because of his musical cultivation, he knew that every musical sound had its own meaning. He wanted to really feel the mood of Shenyin the Great when he was playing the guqin and see why Shenyin the Great was able to compose such sad music. After entering into that mood, the sorrow hidden deep in Futian's heart seemed to be coaxed out all at once. From his childhood until today, even those long-forgotten memories now surfaced in his own mind, accompanied by that music of extreme sadness. All his emotions seemed to be replaced by sadness, nothing else and no other emotions mattered anymore. He seemed to have returned to the past, directly entering into the memory of bygone ages. He saw Hua Fengliu's cultivation being abolished, Jiyu's death in the battle, and when the imperial advisor of Dali released him as he walked away. All the sorrows of his past came to mind. His feelings were magnified even more to the point that he was unable to free himself. It was as if he could no longer escape. The tears on his face flowed freely, unbeknownst to him. Those eyes were no longer bright but were empty and hollow, occupied only by sadness and desperation. He looked just like the living dead. Futian had forgotten everything else and what he wanted to do. Perhaps he had not expected to sink so deeply into the mood. And it was not just him. Everyone had fallen into it, including those who had gone through the divine tribulation. In those long years of cultivation, everyone had tons of stories from the past that were emotional to them. Normally, the things that they had experienced were suppressed so that it would not affect their emotional balance. But no one could escape the influence of this divine requiem. No matter how powerful one's cultivation was, anyone, as long as they owned all their human emotions and desires, would be affected by it. If this scene were witnessed by people on the outside, it would have been absolutely stunning. Of the three major worlds, the divine prefecture, the dark world, the empty divine realm, many were existences at the peak. They all had tears in their eyes. They had all fallen into this sadness, and it was a sight so rare it might not occur even every 1,000 years. In the quiet space, the guqin that contained the will of the great emperor floated in the void. The strings were moving on their own, playing this divine song with endless sorrow. It seemed as if there was no end in sight. The dragon turtle continued moving forward in the void, and dark cracks appeared one by one as if to bring everyone into endless darkness, into eternal exile. Behind Yi Futian, the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were lost as well. Old Ma's face was full of tears. He thought about the death of little Ling's parents. That unforgettable sadness was the eternal pain in his heart, no matter what cultivation level he had reached. It would always be hidden within the depths of his memory, but at this moment, it was thoroughly unleashed. Everyone had different kinds of sadness, but the ending was similar without exception. All the cultivators were caught up in that desolation. Time went by fast, and no one knew how long it had been. Yi Futian, trapped in that extreme sadness, suddenly sensed a trace of consciousness awakening inside him. He seemed to have entered a very mysterious mood. The sadness was still there. It didn't dissipate, and he was still immersed in it. However, there seemed to be a consciousness there. An inexplicable force seemed to affect him, or he seemed to perceive the deep feelings contained in the sorrowful music. Although he had his eyes closed, everything in front of him was so clear. At the same time, it was so elusive and unpredictable. The guqin that was floating in front of him was no longer just the guqin itself. Before the guqin, a figure of peerless elegance appeared. The man looked to be about 30. He clad in clothes purer than snow. He had a temperament that was out of this world. Seeing the appearance of this figure, Yi Futian's heart skipped a beat. It was as if a thought was pulling him back from all that sadness. Was this an illusion? In front of the guqin, a figure appeared. The guqin didn't seem to be playing by itself but was played by this man. However, no one else was able to see him except for Yi Futian. This is not an illusion. A voice sounded inside Yi Futian's head. This was definitely no illusion, but that he had truly entered the mood and perceived the sight in front of him, as well as the existence of the great emperor. As Lord Luo had said, Shenyin the Great continued to exist in another form. His life was integrated into this guqin, and he became one with it. This guqin was definitely not just as simple as an instrument and definitely not as simple as containing a trace of the great emperor's will. Is it the great emperor? A voice came asked. It was Yi Futian's. It was a voice from his soul. The great emperor of ancient times from countless centuries ago. It was the first man of music. Did his life persist to this day? If so, in what form did Shenyin the Great exist? After Yi Futian spoke, he waited quietly, as if for the other man to respond. Time seemed to flow exceptionally slowly. Then the sound of a sigh came out that seemed to contain endless sadness. With just a sigh, Yi Futian was once again brought back into that absolute grievous feeling. However, this sigh caused Yi Futian's heart to beat wildly. It was as if all his previous speculations were confirmed. Lord Luo was right after all. The great emperor had really prevailed. Chapter 2303, The Obsession of Shenyin the Great. After the great emperor let out a sigh, there were no other sounds. He plucked the strings again, playing that sorrowful divine requiem. The sound of the music lingered, but the endless sadness remained. Those who were drawn into it were unable to extricate themselves, and even Yi Futian's soul felt that tremendous sadness. However, but he gradually perceived a feeling in all of that sadness, which was exactly what he had been seeking in the sound of the guqin. He was an expert in music and understood that the rhythm of the music was originated from the heart. Behind every rhythm, there was a story, a feeling it tried to convey. When he plunged himself into this, it was with the intent to feel, to discover what was hidden in the divine requiem. What exactly did Shenyin the Great experience to compel him to compose such despondent music? Even when it was lost, it was still remembered by later generations and included in the roster of divine compositions. With the sound of the music, Yi Futian seemed to be getting many bits and pieces of information. What he saw in his mind's eye did not seem to be too clear. It was somewhat elusive, like a story intertwined with many scenes that were now projected in his mind. Yi Futian didn't do anything deliberately but continued to immerse himself in the sound of the music to feel. He already knew that he perceived the mood. He was almost able to see the origin of the divine requiem. The picture in his head gradually became clearer. With the sound of the guqin, Futian's consciousness seemed to have entered into another time and space, as if he no longer had any consciousness of the self but was now completely immersed in the mood. With clarity, Futian could see two people. One was an elegant scholar, sophisticated and handsome. The other was a woman, beautiful and sunny, with a charming smile and a gorgeous face. Although this scholar was very young, one could vaguely discern Shenyin the Great as a young man. At that time, he was not yet so authoritative or majestic, and he did not have a strong aura. He was more like an innocent young master who exuded a delightful temperament. In these pictures, Futian saw the two learning to play guqin together from the same master, who seemed to be a very powerful individual in music. The two of them learned guqin together. Gradually, they got to know each other and fell in love. Where they were, there was a peach tree grove that was exceptionally beautiful. The peach blossoms covered the ground just like something from a dream. They played music together and composed guqin music. This particular scene felt extraordinarily wonderful. The two were like a golden couple, and their master was very kind to them. He instructed them in cultivation and witnessed their growth and their love. Pieces of their lives were played out quickly, jumping here and there, and they sailed in front of Futian's eyes. The two had experienced many things together, falling in love, loving each other, experienced separation, frustration, and reunion. They had gone through a lot together. In some of the scenes, the two had also experienced many major events. Futian saw the continuous growth of the young scholar in white. He saw that he had caused bloodshed within an entire clan for the sake of his beloved and that his lethal music had slaughtered thousands. In the wake of the pile of bones that had accumulated, he left with the woman. Many similar scenes ensued. During their times together, there were too many stories. Gradually, both of them had cultivated to a very high level, and their musical attainments were getting stronger as their status elevated with it. However, every few years, they would return to where they cultivated and play music together under the peach blossoms. They would take a pot of wine to visit their master, drink with him, and view the peach blossoms together. Among those countless events, this one seemed to be repeating the most, as if it was the most important thing in his life. No matter what realm he cultivated to and no matter how many difficulties he had been through in life, he would always return to the place he was from. Finally, the world changed, and it became heavy and oppressive. The scholar in white was no longer the same scholar in white of yesteryears but a world-renowned existence. Countless people wanted to cultivate under his tutelage. He had reached the top and became a supreme existence himself. In that era, it seemed a bit easier to cultivate, and there were many supreme existences. When the world was going through great changes in those years, he went through many tremendous wars, but there were not many scenes of these wars. Most of what's been revealed were still those of him with his beloved. Until one day, there was something about the battle of the gods. In that battle, heaven and earth disintegrated, and the world collapsed. The entire world began to fragment as the great path fractured. Everything was on the verge of total destruction. It was a disaster for the entire world. And the scholar in white didn't seem to have participated in the battle until the clan he belonged to was shattered. The peach tree grove turned into scorched earth, and his most respected master also perished. Out of anger, he finally joined the war. However, this battle resulted in the death of his beloved woman. In his extreme pain and sorrow, he cast a white sarcophagus for her. However, in the coffin, the woman turned into a guqin, wanting to accompany him forever, fighting with him in every battle. So, with the help of this guqin, he composed that stunning music, the divine requiem. When the divine requiem was heard, the whole world grieved. But in the end, he still couldn't alter fate. The heavenly path collapsed, the world was shattered, and Shenyin the Great himself almost died in the battle. Before his demise, he incorporated his life force into the guqin and turned it into the soul of the guqin. It seemed to him that the two of them would be together forever, entombed within that white sarcophagus. When all these scenes disappeared from his head, Futian finally understood where the guqin came from. It turned out that this guqin was the final resting place of two supreme cultivators, Shenyin the Great and his beloved girl. He finally understood why this dragon turtle was pulling a sarcophagus moving aimlessly in the void. And he finally understood why the dragon turtle was making those sad bellowing. Everything was because of that Guqin. The teacher said that they were looking for a way home. However, the heavenly path had collapsed, and the old world, destroyed. How could they find the way home? Futian couldn't help but be reminded of that peach tree grove. Chapter 2304, Take Me Home. Futian was overtaken by the atmosphere created by this Guqin. It was from the sadness he experienced before. It seemed as if every note was no longer just a simple note but a feeling, a scene from the life of Shenyin the Great. His most respected teacher, his favorite hometown, and his most beloved woman were all lost in that great battle. If he had reached the peak of realms, what of it? He was so hopeless that he finally fell into total despair and composed the Divine Requiem, a composition that was known throughout the world. However, the outcome was that he too became part of that Guqin. Those lively notes imprinted in Futian's mind as the rhythm became clearer. Suddenly, a Guqin appeared in front of him, which was transformed by the divine wheel of the great path. The strings of the instrument moved, and every note seemed to be filled with immense sorrow. Each beating note seemed to resonate with the divine requiem. Futian seemed to be playing the divine requiem. Some experiences of Shenyin the Great's lifetime bore shocking similarities to Futian's. The two men resonated emotionally. However, even though he had fallen into that boundless dejection before, Futian seemed to have escaped from it at this moment. Not quite a true breakaway, but he was able to reach beyond the emotion of sadness and had come to a place of acceptance, which was also the feelings conveyed by the divine requiem. Only the person who had gone through the progression of these feelings could compose this divine requiem. And Futian seemed to have understood something and was doing exactly that. Although the notes he played were far from the true divine requiem, the feelings were there so that the notes he played were integrated into the atmosphere of the divine requiem, as if resonating with it. Gradually, Futian's music became much more skilled, and his sense of sorrow became even stronger. He was still immersed in the endless sadness, but his consciousness was quite lucid, surpassing the emotions he was feeling. As the music played, countless invisible currents surrounded Futian's person. In front of the Guqin transformed by the great emperor, an elusive phantom sat quietly there. It seemed to be looking up at Futian at the moment. It was as if he embodied a complete life force, like he were truly Shenyin the Great. What century is it now? A questioning voice drifted into Futian's ears, making his heart shudder. The great emperor had spoken. Although Futian had been in contact with the will of great emperors before, aside from Emperor Qing, this was only the second time that he had really seen a great emperor who was fully conscious. He was speaking to him. Elder, it is now the age of the divine prefecture. It has been more than 10,000 years, Futian replied. After hearing his answer, the figure fell into deep silence for a while, then let out a sigh. His eyes drifted to a place far away, then back down at his Guqin. He had turned into a Guqin, drifting about for countless years, and he had lost count of what year or age it was. Where is home? The sound of a deep sigh was heard. It seemed that Shenyin the Great knew that he was without a home. His hometown had long been destroyed, his master and his beloved were no longer there. Everything existed only in his mind, a construct of his persistence. After the collapse of the heavenly path, the world has changed. This is the original realm. After the collapse of the heavenly path, the world is no longer stable. Futian responded, the hometown that you seek, perhaps, no longer remains. He didn't lie to him. Futian was being as honest as he could be. No matter how stubborn Shenyin the Great was, holding on to the idea of home, it was nothing but wishful thinking. There was another moment of silence. The phantom of Shenyin the Great looked at Futian and asked, "Who are you, and why are you in control of the body of Shenjia the Great Emperor?" Clearly, he had recognized that this divine body belonged to Shenjia the Great Emperor. "I am Futian, the college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy in the original realm, as well as the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace in Ziwei Segmentum. I acquired the body of Shenjia the Great Emperor by chance and resonated with it. This caused the scene seen by the elder, Yi Futian responded. Shenyin the Great scrutinized him a little more closely. In short, Yi Futian had already received the inheritance of two great emperors. Ziwei Segmentum, the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Does Ziwei the Great still exist? Asked Shenyin the Great. Ziwei the Great had already perished when the heavenly path collapsed. But he had left behind a will to seal up the entire Ziwei Segmentum. Not long ago, the seal was broken, and Ziwei Segmentum was connected to the outside world once again. The will of Ziwei the Great remains in the starry sky world and was inherited by me, Yi Futian continued. Shenyin the Great cast another look at Yi Futian, and that look seemed to contain deep suggestions. Not only did this man possess the inheritance of the two top great emperors, controlling the physical body of Shenjia the Great Emperor, but he had also inherited the will of Ziwei the Great. In addition, he was proficient in music, enough to comprehend the true meaning of the divine requiem. He was able to enter the world of his feeling. Indeed, he was truly an extraordinary individual. No wonder he could play the notes that resonated with the divine requiem and see everything that was in front of him. Sir, there is nothing ahead. The original realm is no longer the world it used to be. The hometown that you used to know is long gone. I hope that you can let go of your persistence to return to a place that no longer exists, Yi Futian said as he bowed. If they continued, the dragon turtle would keep going and inevitably impact the surface of other realms, destroying them. The worlds in the lower world could not withstand the force of the dragon turtle. They would collapse immediately. Yi Futian could only persuade Shenyin the Great to let go of this stubbornness, as Shenyin the Great was the only one who could prevent this disastrous scenario from happening. Other cultivators, even those powerful enough to survive the second divine tribulation, had fallen into that endless sorrow in the music. They were completely unable to stop the dragon turtle's forward momentum. The way ahead has ended. Where is the way back? Shenyin the Great murmured. His casual sigh seemed to contain a strong sense of loss. He wanted to find a way home, but there was no road ahead. Where was the way home? If he could not find the way back, where would he go? I pledge to find a grove of peach trees for you, sir, and bury the guqin when the peach blossoms are in full bloom, Yi Futian continued. Shenyin the Great looked at him now and saw from his eyes that he was truly sincere. The guqin could communicate and know the hearts of men. Perhaps Yi Futian could perceive his existence through the divine requiem and understood his feelings. This proved that they were of the same kind and that this young man in front of him bore some similarities to him. Shenyin the Great took one more look at Yi Futian. Divine lights appeared upon his body, shining directly upon Yi Futian. The light penetrated Yi Futian's brow chakra. It bore into Yi Futian's mind and consciousness. Shenyin the Great seemed to be connected to Yi Futian somehow. After a while, the divine lights dissipated, and the way that Shenyin the Great was looking at Yi Futian seemed to have changed. Perhaps everything in this world is destined, Shenyin the Great murmured to himself. He then said to Yi Futian, I will lend you this guqin for 300 years, until the day when higher heights can be reached in the future. Take me home now. Take you home? Yi Futian looked at Shenyin the Great, a little puzzled. His home had disintegrated long ago and no longer existed. How were they going to go back? Chapter 2305, Going to Ziwei Segmentum. Shenyin the Great wanted to lend him the guqin for 300 years. Judging from the words spoken by the great emperor, it seemed that he had some expectation of him. Had Shenyin the Great detected anything from him? Why did the great emperor think that Yi Futian could take him home? Yi Futian didn't quite understand, but he heard Shenyin the Great continue, I'll take you back first. Where to? Let's go to Ziwei Segmentum, said Yi Futian. The great emperor had lent him the divine guqin, and many top cultivators were here watching them. Only in Ziwei Segmentum could they stop the coveting of these people, or at the very least, give them some time to cool down. Very well, Shenyin the Great agreed. Suddenly, a terrible rumbling sound came out, and the dragon turtle turned around and actually headed in the opposite direction. It was moving incredibly fast as it sped through the void and went back the same way it came. Great waves appeared on the guqin. Cultivators were knocked off of the back of the dragon turtle. When they were knocked off from the city's ruins, the rhythmic storm on the back of the dragon turtle gradually dissipated as well, but that strong sense of sorrow remained. Futian freed himself from the previous feelings and looked at the divine Guqin floating in the void in front of him. He felt that everything was a little surreal, like a dream, extremely curious. The divine Guqin floated upon him as strands of divine glory penetrated his brow chakra and seemed to have made a certain connection with him. Futian felt a sense of familiarity. He stretched out his hands and stroked the strings. This was the divine Guqin transformed by Shenyin the Great and his beloved. It had embodied their emotions for a lifetime, as well as their endless sorrow. "Sir, what should be the name of this Guqin?" Futian asked. "You name it." The voice of Shenyin the Great sounded in his mind. "Let's call it Yearning," said Futian. Shenyin the Great was silent for a moment, then agreed, "Very well." This Guqin was then named Yearning. As for those top figures who were knocked off by the dragon turtle, they gradually regained their consciousness. All of them were powerful cultivators and could recover themselves after they came out of the sorrowful mood. Even so, they still felt an extreme sorrow deep inside their hearts. It was as if the sadness had been seared in their souls and could not be erased. Perhaps some things still needed one's own willpower to defeat it. The dragon turtle. They looked at the sky above and scanned across the sky with their divine consciousness. Then, one by one, they stepped into the void, chasing after the dragon turtle. Secretly, they were a little shocked. The dragon turtle had gone in the opposite direction. This seemed impossible. However, when they caught up with the dragon turtle, they saw a figure standing on its back, a man with white hair and white clothing. It was Futian. This made those top figures even more shocked. Him again. How many times was this? The cultivators from the Shangqing domain felt especially puzzled. From Shenjia the Great Emperor to Ziwei the Great, and now Shenyin the Great, why did it have to be him again? On the back of the dragon turtle, only Futian was there. Did this mean that Futian had been recognized by Shenyin the Great as well? What kind of existence exactly was this guy? Futian looked at Renhuang Chen and the others. He nodded slightly at them. Renhuang Chen and the others stepped out one after another, arriving on the back of the dragon turtle, moving next to Futian. There was shock in their hearts as well. All of them were trapped in that deep sorrow before, but had this been when Futian contacted Shenyin the Great and gained his recognition? Lord Luo was amazed. He made extraordinary musical attainments himself and was already a giant-level figure. However, he was unable to perceive the sentiment within the divine requiem. Futian must have done it, otherwise, he could not possibly stand on the dragon turtle now. He always believed that the great emperor was still around, existing in one form or another. Perhaps he had been integrated into that Guqin, or else it would have been impossible for it to possess such power. So now, it should be the great emperor who had chosen Futian. After Ziwei the Great, the inheritance of yet another extraordinary great emperor. This white-haired young man seemed to collect more and more halos along the way. As for the other top cultivators, they each had their own ideas. They had seen the Guqin in front of Futian. This Guqin was definitely a divine Guqin, a divine item, and it was able to play the divine requiem independently. It made them sink so deeply into it that they were unable to extricate themselves. Now, it was obtained by Futian. Where is the dragon turtle going? They stared in the direction of the dragon turtle and noted that it was where the dragon turtle had come from. However, now it was going on the way back. Where did it want to take Futian and the others? None of the top cultivators acted rashly but followed the dragon turtle instead. Obviously, they still had lingering fears about what had happened before. They were worried about offending the will of Shenyin the Great and that the divine requiem might resound again. It had been proven previously that no one could resist the divine requiem. No matter their realm of cultivation, all would fall for it. The dragon turtle continued moving through the void, continuing forward, passing through the surfaces of many realms. Many cultivators of the surface who witnessed the sight in the void could not help but felt greatly disturbed in their hearts. Lord Luo and other cultivators who were acquainted with Yi Futian also stepped onto the back of the dragon turtle and came to Yi Futian's side. Lord Luo looked at Yi Futian and said, "Congratulations are in order." Yi Futian clearly understood what the congratulations were for. Elder's insight was far more impressive, responded Yi Futian. Lord Luo was the first person to recognize that the great emperor might exist in another form, and he had shown great respect to the tomb previously. Even those whose realms were higher than him, including the existences that had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path, were not as accurate as he had been. "You saw the great emperor?" Lord Luo asked Yi Futian via voice transmission. Obviously, he had his suspicions, though he didn't ask directly, opting to communicate through voice transmission. Yi Futian did not deny it. "In the depths of the music, I met Shenyin the Great." Lord Luo's look at Yi Futian was full of meaning. Although he had guessed it, he was still a little shocked when he heard that Yi Futian had seen the great emperor. To meet the great emperor in the sounds of Guqin was also what he had desired. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. Time passed as the dragon turtle shuttled through the space in the void, drove through immense space, until it was separated from the domain of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, and headed into deep space. This caused those top figures to wonder. They had been following without making any moves, wanting to see where the dragon turtle was going. At this moment, some people seemed to have realized something. "He is going to the starry sky world," a top figure said, following Yi Futian to Ziwei Segmentum. Yi Futian would be able to borrow the power of Ziwei the Great in that territory. Once the dragon turtle took the Guqin of Shenyin the Great to the Ziwei Segmentum, no one could overtake Yi Futian. Yi Futian seemed to be in complete control of Shenyin the Great and his will. Could he control the dragon turtle in whatever direction it went? Chapter 2306, Giving Up. Shall we strike? All the cultivators secretly asked themselves. The dragon turtle was taking Yi Futian and the Guqin of Shenyin the Great to Ziwei Segmentum. If they delayed making a move on Yi Futian, they would have no opportunity when Yi Futian was in the Ziwei Segmentum. But again, who among them could be sure that they had the ability to deal with the Guqin itself? These top figures hesitated. This Guqin was a real divine item. The strings could move by themselves and play the divine requiem, which ensnared all the top cultivators in that endless sadness. If it could be obtained and controlled, what kind of power would that be? What was more, they had not yet unearthed the secret of Shenyin the Great, but Yi Futian may have already done exactly that. A top cultivator from the dark world couldn't wait any longer and struck. He raised his hand to grab at the dragon turtle. Suddenly, a terrible black hole of death appeared in the void, swallowing up everything. This black hole caused a huge vortex to appear in this space. The forward speed of the dragon turtle seemed to be affected as rumbling sounds of horror were heard. This space started to collapse madly. It was as if it was about to shatter completely into nothingness, and the dragon turtle, too, would be swallowed into that darkness. Previously, those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path had walked directly onto the back of the dragon turtle, wanting to snatch the Guqin. They were attacked by the music and were ensnared in its throes. The fact was that their supreme strength combined was terrifying enough that they could hamper the forward movement of the dragon turtle. Upon seeing this, that Guqin in Yi Futian's arms flew out. It was as the strings were moving by themselves again. A horrific storm of rhythm swept at that top cultivator from the dark world. The invisible rhythmic ripples seemed unstoppable, directly invading the other's mind. In an instant, the sadness that had not completely dissipated rushed into his heart again. The face of the cultivator from the dark world changed. The music from Guqin was still playing, but his figure retreated in a flash, abandoning his attempt to strike. Everyone stared at the Guqin ahead, and it seemed that Lord Luo was right. This Guqin did indeed contain a life force. Coupled with the coercion of the great emperor in its music, it seemed that Shenyin the Great indeed existed in yet another form in this world. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain the phenomenon. It was as if the spirit of Shenyin the Great was at work. Did Yi Futian perceive the existence of Shenyin the Great? Many cultivators wondered. At this moment, someone else made another move. An extremely tyrannical cultivator from the empty divine realm slashed through the void with his palm, and cracks appeared between heaven and earth. It created a space of exile that swallowed up the road in which the dragon turtle was moving. Instantly, the dragon turtle, which was moving forward, was swallowed up as well. Exile. Futian's eyes sharpened. Judging from his opponent's realm, he could easily destabilize the great path of the original realm, banishing them into a world of nothingness, even opening up a channel to the divine prefecture. Clearly, they were aware that the others wanted them to leave the original realm to be unable to move forward into the starry sky world in Ziwe Segmentum. The cracks in the space expanded, resembling an entrance to darkness, engulfing the gigantic dragon turtle along with the entire ancient city of ruins in tow. Futian and the others instantly entered this unstable spatial crack where the great path. Inside was chaotic and disorderly. This was a land of banishment. It existed only when the space of the original realm was broken, but this place could also lead to the divine prefecture. The dragon turtle moved forward in the dark, but the same rhythm persisted as if guiding its direction. Accompanied by some violent roars, the dragon turtle navigated forward in the crevices of the void, then shuttled around and returned to the land of the original realm. However, along its path, the dark cracks became more and more terrifying, tearing the space apart. In this instant, the ginormous body of the dragon turtle was already in another remote place, much further away, as cultivators chased them from behind. Their expressions were solemn. It seemed that no matter what they did, this dragon turtle would continue to elude them. Elders, let's stop here. If the rhythm is still playing as before, please ask yourselves, if you could, would you retreat under your own power? Futian said loud and clear, the great emperor doesn't care to tarry with all of you like this, but if you insist on this foolery, perhaps you will feel the anger from the great emperor himself. All the cultivators who heard what Futian had to say were stunned, and a great conflict ensued in their hearts. Futian seemed to have indicated that Shenyin the Great was still here, alive, existing in the world in another form. He had autonomous consciousness. He could attack them if they continued to be unruly. The great emperor would take action. There was a thoughtful look in their eyes. It was as if they were contemplating the veracity of Futian's words. But in conjunction with everything that happened before, they realized that Futian might not have been lying to them. What he said was probably the truth, the great emperor was still here. Otherwise, none of this made any sense. The great emperor was still here. With the first man of music in ancient times here, how dare they try to seize the Guqin? Since the great emperor had already made his own choice, it would be meaningless no matter what they did. It was a foregone conclusion that could no longer be changed. Give up. Many cultivators wondered. In fact, those giants who had not overcome the divine tribulation had already given up. In their previous experience of all that had happened, they knew that it was futile. It was already a great favor bestowed on them to allow them out of that grievous mood, so what other ambitions could they speak of at the moment? Not to mention that as long as there were other tribulation-level cultivators around, it was far from their turn yet. Just as everyone was considering the matter, the dragon turtle marched forward and drove through the boundless void. Over time, the starlight fell from the sky. It seemed as if they had now entered the territory of Ziwe Segmentum. At this time, some cultivators stopped and did not continue their pursuit. Later, more people stopped moving forward. As they stopped one by one, they looked further down the road that the dragon turtle was on. They knew that there was no more hope. All they could do was watch the dragon turtle take the Guqin, Futian, and the others inside the Ziwe Segmentum. In a nutshell, the dragon turtle appeared with the ancient ruins of a city in tow, and Futian was ultimately the only one who benefited from it. For Futian to be the one to take the inheritance of Shenyin the Great, what else could anyone say or do? With such a genius talent to exist in the land of the original realm, divine prefecture, the dark world, and the empty divine realm would not be quiet for long. Sooner or later, the cultivators in those worlds would meet him somewhere, somehow. Let's go, someone said, then turned to leave. After that, many powerful cultivators left one by one. There was no point in staying here any longer. They had already entered Ziwei segmentum. What else could they do now? After they left, the dragon turtle descended on Ziwei imperial star. Soon, the news began to spread wildly in the original realm. Yi Futian, the college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy and the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, had obtained the inheritance of yet another great emperor after Shunjia the Great Emperor and Ziwei the Great. Chapter 2307, Changes in Original Realm. Starry Sky World. Ziwei Cultivation Court. Beneath the boundless starry sky, Yi Futian sat cross-legged in a quiet location. Surrounded by stars, Yi Futian, who was fully bathed in the starlight, seemed extremely holy. In front of him lay the guqin that he named Yearning. At this moment, traces of rhythmic divine light continuously wafted out from the instrument, connecting with Yi Futian at his brow chakra so that his entire body was enveloped by the rhythmic divine light. In his mind, more and more memories presented themselves, and most of them were connected with music scores and the moods contained in each piece of the music. Shunyin the Great was the first man of music in his era. His attainments in music were so superior that few in history could be named along with him, either in ancient times or modern. Naturally, he was not only known for the Divine Requiem. The Divine Requiem was a shocking composition created after his own experience of great sorrow. However, even before that, he was already a master of countless pieces of music, some of which were extremely powerful, and their influence was not much weaker than that of the Divine Requiem. Now, Shunyin the Great was ready to pass on all this to Yi Futian when he regained consciousness again. He promised Yi Futian the guqin for 300 years. In return, Yi Futian would escort him home. Although Yi Futian was still unclear on the actual meaning of these words from Shunyin the Great, he was not about to pursue them if the great emperor himself didn't deign to clarify. For him, the priority was to focus on his own cultivation. Now that he had control over Ziwei segmentum and the original realm, he felt the pressure acutely. It was not enough for him to be a mere upper Renhuang. He needed a stronger realm of cultivation. Day by day, Yi Futian had been receiving the inheritance of the guqin, and countless memories appeared in his mind. After a long while, the divine light on the guqin gradually dimmed, and the strings stopped moving as the divine light went out. However, Yi Futian didn't stop cultivating. He sat there quietly, and he continued to be surrounded by the light of the rhythm. He needed time to perceive and digest the rhythmic way passed on to him by Shunyin the Great. There were so many exquisite pieces of guqin music that he needed time to sort them out in his head. In the ground below, many looked up at Yi Futian. Those who could cultivate in the Starry Sky Cultivation Court were close confidants, as well as allies. As they witnessed Yi Futian inherit the power from Shunyin the Great, they couldn't help but wonder what lied ahead for this young man. The sword goddess of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow raised her head to look at Yi Futian. Ning Yuan, I am afraid things will not be quiet for long. Previously, at the Donghua banquet, they knew very well how Ning Yuan, the domain chief of the domain chief's manor, had treated Yi Futian. Ning Hua hunted Yi Futian relentlessly and almost succeeded in killing him. Today, the power that was within Yi Futian's control was far above that of the Donghua domain chief's manor. If Yi Futian wanted to settle these old scores, he could do so now by heading over to Donghua domain in the Divine Prefecture. However, that was the domain chief's manor under the rule of the Great Emperor. Presumably, Yi Futian had some concerns as well, so he wouldn't act rashly. However, with his talent and potential, he may very well stand at the top in the future. As long as nothing happened to him, this debt would be settled sooner rather than later. At that time, the domain chief's manor in the Donghua domain would be greatly endangered. As the current situation stood, Ning Hua, known as the #1 genius of Donghua domain, was hard-pressed to contend with Yi Futian. Aside from all the things that had happened in the past, it should not be too difficult for Yi Futian to kill Ning Hua. There were too many means and power under Yi Futian's control, and Ning Hua had none of these. In the Starry Sky world, everyone was quietly cultivating, perceiving the power of the Imperial Star. Many had made progress. Especially cultivators compatible with the power of the Imperial Star made progress much faster than the others. Several months had passed, and Yi Futian stopped cultivating and started walking downward. There were familiar faces all around him. Someone walked towards Yi Futian. Lord Luo was heard asking Yi Futian, "How was it?" Shenyin the Great was the first man of music in the ancient era. The rhythm technique he cultivated is far too sophisticated for me to fully control and absorb for the time being. These past few months have been far from adequate. I am afraid that I will need to cultivate and comprehend frequently in the future, said Yi Futian. When he heard those words, Lord Luo knew that Yi Futian had completely inherited the musical inheritance of Shenyin the Great. How much help would Yi Futian receive from this first man in music from ancient times? No one from the same generation as Yi Futian could compare with him just on the way of rhythm alone. Fangari and Blind Tai came over as well. Although they were from Four Corner Village, they had regarded themselves as members of the Heavenly Mandate Academy after choosing to follow Yi Futian. Since Yi Futian was the center, whether it was the village or Heavenly Mandate Academy, or even Ziwei Imperial Palace, they would be part of Yi Futian's power in the future. They knew this very well. How is it outside? Asked Yi Futian. Not so quiet, Fangari replied. Since the dragon turtle dragged you to the Ziwei segmentum, the news had shaken the original realm, and many cultivators from those top principalities wanted to visit you again. However, because you were not here, they were turned away. But judging from their intentions, it looks like they want to get close to you. At the moment, Yi Futian was the most prestigious figure in the original realm. He had unlimited potential. Naturally, there would be forces from Divine Prefecture who wanted to befriend him. Everyone could see that Yi Futian was definitely regarded as one of the most enchanting genius existences in the Divine Prefecture and maybe even the entire world. His growth was akin to the journey of those other major figures. If the Divine Prefecture is not aligned to deal with the Dark World, what good does it do to befriend me? Yi Futian responded. Unless, of course, they could unite all the principalities and launch a war against the Dark World. Well, forget about this for now. There is something else. As soon as the Dragon Turtle incident happened, more cultivators came from the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World, and the empty Divine Realm. Those top figures never left either. They began to search for the ancient relics in the boundless void of the original realm as if wanting to re-excavate the mysteries of the original realm. Fangari continued, and this time, it is said that several principalities have already rediscovered the relics of ancient times. As if it has been destined that as the entire original realm is changing, ancient ruins are also reappearing one after the another. Yi Futian's expression grew somber. Would more relics appear? And it seemed that there was more than just the one. The original realm was the interface that formed after the collapse of the heavenly path. It seemed reasonable for ancient relics to emerge. Ziwei the Great and Shenyin the Great had all appeared in the original realm. The change of heaven and earth originated in the original realm. It seems that this prophecy is not false after all, Lord Luo murmured. Yi Futian's eye drifted toward Lord Luo, and he asked, "Where did that prophecy come from?" "I don't know." Lord Luo shook his head. But now, cultivators in the Divine Prefecture and other worlds have all heard such prophesy, or else the top cultivators from other major worlds would not have descended in the land of the original realm. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.